Hello, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Hope you're having a good Friday evening wherever you are. I've had a rather good day, actually. It's been a pretty tiring week working through sermons from the 17th century in Scotland. But today, while I was working, I had the pleasure of listening to the Guff Stream by Hector Drummond and Simon Roberts, which I'd highly recommend if you don't check those out. If you haven't checked those out, and then I'd never really heard him before, but there's a channel by a guy called Baden Rees, and he had Simon Roberts on and a guy called Nick Unwashed. And they were talking about celebrities who are annoying and rating them essentially. So that was good fun. Yeah, it's been a decent day, and then I've just been getting ready for this stream, which I'm so excited for. Today we're going to be looking at something of a niche topic, but I think something that many of us will be interested in, which is the role of mythology, fantasy, and religion in British rock music between 1970 and 1972. Why this topic? Well, many of you, I know, enjoy fantasy. This channel engages with Tolkien, Lewis, MacDonald, all of these areas. And we've been looking at the themes in those works, how they're influenced by Christianity, various mythologies, and also the broader philosophical and theological ideas and how we're supposed to live. At the same time, many of us are lovers of rock music from this era. I know in my own youth that I was a big fan of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, as well as bands like the Rolling Stones. And what struck me recently, which didn't at the time, but it struck me recently was that when you look at the lyrics of a lot of these bands, they are heavily drawing on various archetypes from mythology, using various pictures, you might say, from Christianity or other movements and spiritualities to inform the songs that they're writing. Indeed, many of them draw on Tolkien, which we'll get to in due course. So I wanted to just have a nice chilled out stream for the end of the week, nothing too major. A nice stream where we can just look at some great songs, some great lyrics from songs by really beautiful souls, and look at some of these influences and ideas in a bit more detail. I think it's particularly apt as well because many of you in this who watch this channel are part of maybe a sphere which looks at maybe conservative or reactionary ideas. And I remember a number of months ago, the Academic Agent did a stream on kind of conservative or reactionary ideas within British rock music, particularly looking at a band like the Kinks, and noticing how even if the singers themselves or the musicians themselves wouldn't ascribe to what we might call a right wing point of view or worldview, their lyrics are nostalgic for a past that they see as being overturned. Uh, it's it's something which they realized that they were losing something important and wanted to restore that or maintain that. And I think in many ways the appeal of the fantasy and mythological in these groups is also harking to that, and we'll get to that. This sense that there's something more that's being lost, and we need to recover those that power that exists in those traditions and mold it into a present or even future vision, or at least in music. But before we get to all of that, I just had a announcement to make. So a couple of weeks ago, my channel was monetized. It passed the monetization uh, threshold, which is great, and I'm really, really pleased about that. It's taken a lot of work, and I'm really thankful to everybody whose contributions, whether watching or commenting and so on, have made that possible. And what that means is a couple of things. One thing is that I believe that super chats are now available on this stream. So if you would like to, you can send a super chat. Alternatively, there is now membership for the channel, and there are two tiers of membership. Essentially, for $2.99 a month, you can be a fellow of St. Anne's. Those of you who know that hideous strength will know what that is a reference to. And essentially, you get custom emojis. For $4.99 a month, you can be a companion of St. Anne's, and this includes the emojis, but also about 25 or so videos that aren't on the channel proper, but are kind of in the back catalogue, and you'd have access to that. There's no obligation to sign up. There's no burden on anybody to do so. It's really, if you just wanted to give some money to support the channel, then you can do so in these ways. But there's no obligation at all, and I'm just grateful that we've got a thriving community, and I'm looking forward to it expanding and growing in exciting ways. So before we get in, hello to everybody who's watching. Hello to John Boy, good to see you. Tricky Who, TBR is a comedy genius, you're quite right. Hello Vingle, hello Scardy Warrior. It's great to see you all, and to those who are lurking outside of the chat, it's great to see you too. And I will get to comments as we go as well. I should say as well, so my picture today, so this is not me now. This is me about, when would it be? 10 years ago. And when I was, so I would have been still at school at that time. And when I was at school, I was in a couple of bands, and one of them was called the Yellow Hammers. We were inspired by the Yardbirds, and we needed to find another name for it. We needed to find another bird name, which we thought was cool, so we went with Yellow Hammers. And then another one called Matter of Urgency, and I thought I was super cool. Bit cringy now, but that's how I used to dress up. So yes, that's I thought it was very appropriate for this stream to have that photo. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do this. Yep. And what we're going to do is we're going to look through some of the lyrics, and feel free to throw your comments in as well. There'll be things I've missed or whatever, so feel free to contribute. And unfortunately, the only thing with this stream which would make it perfect is if we could play the music. But as you all know, YouTube has a very strict copyright policy, and if I did that, this stream would be taken down probably in about 3 seconds. So we'll just have to do with the lyrics. But if there's songs that you've not heard before, feel free to go away and listen to them afterwards, or even at the same time as I'm talking. I've actually found listening to music and streams at the same time quite a relaxing thing to do. It's kind of cool. Anyway, so the first one here is a bit of a cheat. It's actually not from 1970 to 1972. This is on Led Zeppelin 2, and it's from 1969. Nevertheless, I thought it's close enough, and it's just filled with wonderful imagery that we just have to look at for this stream. And it's by Led Zeppelin, Ramble On. So the leaves are falling all around. Time I was on my way. Thanks to you, I'm much obliged for such a pleasant stay. But now it's time for me to go. The autumn moonlights my way. So let's stop there for a second. What have we got here in these first few verses? Well, we have a picture of an individual. We don't know who it is, but he's been staying at a pleasant place, somewhere which has been refreshing and relaxing and nice to stay. However, it is now time to move on, and this is indicated by a change in the season. So the leaves are falling. This is something we often find in autumn, and later in the verse he tells us that it's the autumn moon that has arisen. So it is now time for him to go. Automatically, my mind springs to two events, not necessarily consciously dropped in here, but they're certainly reminiscent. And Vingle's got it already. It's like Frodo after staying at Rivendell. For a time, the hobbits, after getting the ring to Rivendell, have a pleasant time, recuperate, refresh, but they know they can't stay there any longer. They have to move on to do the quest of the ring. And so, uh, and the other one as well is Bilbo's various stays. Particularly, I was thinking of when he stays after the Battle of the Five Armies at Beorn's house for a time and eating honey and enjoying the fruits, but he needs to go home. And this is often, we'll see this theme return and recur, not just in Led Zeppelin, but in other bands as well. This idea that although there is something, we're currently in a comfortable place, that actually we cannot stop here any longer. We need to move on. There's something within us which yearns for something more than we already have, something more than just the pleasant, something which, as we will see, will involve hardship. And that comes to the next couple of lines in the verse. For now I smell the rain, and with it pain, and it's headed my way. Sometimes I grow so tired, but I know I've got one thing I've got to do. So the singer knows that even if he decided to stay in this pleasant place, this pain that's coming with the rain, so it's something outside of his control, and it's going to come down upon him, he can't avoid it. It's coming his way. He must go out and confront it. That's why he must leave this pleasant stay. And in a sense, this ties in with autumn again, right? Because summer generally is a pleasant time, but autumn marks a transition into winter, and winter is representative of death, of struggle, of the difficulty in surviving. So this journey that he's making is marked out by the cosmos in some way. Somebody like Philosophicat could probably tell you much more about the specific meanings of the autumn moon here. But yeah, so he needs to confront this. He needs to move beyond the comfortable. And then we move into the chorus. Ramble on, and now's the time is now, to sing my song. I'm going round the world, I gotta find my girl. On my way, I've been this way 10 years to the day. Ramble on, gotta find the queen of all my dreams. So let's break this down. So ramble on. Ramble has kind of two broad meanings. One is speech which lacks some kind of coherence and is at length. YouTubers are very guilty of this. I think of somebody like, well, he's not a YouTuber, but Curtis Yarvin, he rambles, right? But the other meaning, which is probably more specific to this tune, is that of what a rambler does. And a rambler is somebody who crosses the countryside. At least that's how it's used in the United Kingdom. There's the song, the I'm a Rambling Man by the Allman Brothers. That's probably that's also talking about the same thing. So somebody that journeys, that crosses terrain. And I couldn't help but thinking that this was, in a small way, a reference to the concept of the wanderer. In Anglo-Saxon poetry, there's a poem called The Wanderer, this man whose home has been destroyed, and he is left without his people, without his lord, without all the goods, that things that came of that time. It's been destroyed by violence, by other warring tribes, and he is left wandering around the world. And this influenced Tolkien very heavily. Indeed, he paraphrases verses from The Wanderer in The Lord of the Rings. And of course, Aragorn, who says these lines, is himself a wanderer. He's somebody who he's somebody who, before his mission to destroy the ring, or to help the ring bearer, is essentially in the wilderness wandering and defending the hobbits. But he is not somebody who, to the eye, is on a specific quest, but he's specifically linked with the idea of wandering by Bilbo, who has this poem about him. All that is gold does not glitter, Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. So Aragorn is somebody who wanders, who travels, who crosses terrain. He is a rambler, but he is not lost. And in a sense, we can see this as being the same with the singer of this song. He rambles on. He is kind of traversing terrain. It's not got necessarily a specific destination, but he has a goal, and maybe that's the same with Aragorn. He has a goal. He's got to find his girl, his woman. We'll discover more about this woman in the next verse, or the next couple of verses, I should say. But that's who he's searching for. So he cannot stay in this pleasant place. If he stays there, he will never find her. So he must overcome this suffering and find this woman. At the same time, he's going to be singing his song. Now, I want you to think throughout this video that this idea of singing a song isn't just a reference to making music. In a sense, it's an idea which is connected to the notion that music has power, magical power, you might say, or cosmological power. We'll go into more detail later on, but it's something that can actually change the world. It's like casting a spell. And so when this guy says he's going to sing my song as he goes around the world, it's a statement of power, a statement of I'm going to fight, essentially, against the world to find this woman. And this is the queen of all of his dreams. So again, the dreams are often seen as modes of engaging with transcendent or higher realities. They're portals to things. And so through his dreams, he can see the object that he's seeking. He can see the woman he desires, but he must find her in the world itself. So as we move, and so he says, the time is now. The autumn has come. The time is now. So he's got no time for spreading roots. The time has come to be gone. And though our health we drank 1,000 times, it's time to ramble on. So again, this picture of a lovely, warm and happy place where people drink to each other's health, like Rivendell, as we've discussed earlier. He has to leave there. He can't actually stay in a location and, like a tree, spread his roots there. He must be like a rolling stone moving on. So we get the chorus again. And here then we get into the nub of this tale. And indeed, it is a tale. It's almost like a bardic tale. He tells us as much as I tell you no lie. He's conscious of what he's trying to tell you. Mine's a tale that can't be told. My freedom I hold dear. How years ago, in days of old, when magic filled the air, 'twas in the darkest depths of Mordor, I met a girl so fair. But Gollum and the evil one crept up and slipped away with her. Yeah, and there's nothing I can do now. I guess I'll keep on. So there's so much to discuss in this verse. First is that, so he's talking about a time, he when he says in days of old when magic filled the air, this is already setting the context of this story in the ancient mythological past. It's very much like Tolkien's works, which at the outset essentially say these events occurred in the world, but many eons ago, when these things were possible. We now live in a time where magic is not the main power, or is not present in the same way that it once was, or we're not aware of it in the same way. At that time, there was magic ruled the air, as it says here. It flushes in everything. So this is a mythological time that he's situating this in. And so he's giving distance from this story from the present. He's setting it almost, it's ancient, it could also be ahistorical. You know, the mythology of the Norse mythology or the Greek mythology doesn't really happen in history as such. happens in a kind of separate sphere or place from human history. That's what this is like. And he's saying, this is a tale I had from them. It's also a really clever idea. And again, I don't think this is necessarily conscious on Robert Plant's part. But when we look at Finnish mythology, there's this beautiful tale of the two bards. And one of the bards, Väinämöinen, I think his name is. Vingo will, of course, correct me. But he is an old bard, and his songs come from recitation and from the things that he's experienced from the world itself, the ancient and old and deep things with roots in the world. Whereas Yukahainen seeks to create his own songs, and they are much weaker. In a sense, by saying this was in days of old when magic filled the air, that this isn't something that Robert Plant just created on his own whim. This is something which has the weight of history and reality behind it, and that's something we see with Tolkien. We see it with Lewis also, especially in That Hideous Strength, where Merlin. Spoilers for the book. Merlin is resurrected, as it were, or brought back to life, and he is the only person at that time who can still wield magic, whereas in his own time, there were many magic users or people. And when we say magic, it's the ability to either interpret or engage with the world using incantations, let's say, or abilities. So that's the context. And then he says, "'Twas in the darkest depths of Mordor I met a girl so fair." So, as you will know, Mordor is a realm in Middle-earth which is controlled by Sauron. He is the Dark Lord of Middle-earth, and it's his realm where he breeds his orcs and creates his armies and has many slaves working for him. And it is a barren and desolate land. Nothing grows certainly in the heart of Mordor. On its outskirts, there's maybe weeds and twisted thorns and briars, but within its heart, nothing grows. It's a desolate wasteland. And this is a very conscious reference to that. That is the place where the singer is at in this moment. He wants us to conjure the Tolkien mythology, but also as a representation of his own spiritual state or emotional state, that this was a man who was in the depths of despair and darkness and depression, where there was no life and vitality in his life. Spiritually, he was in bleakness, and he was he was in the darkest, the most horrible place you could be. In 17th century literature, they would talk about being in hell itself. That's the idea that's being conjured here. But in that horrible place, which is very painful, and you can't escape it, but you want it to go away. You want to find some relief, but you don't know where to look. This singer met a girl so fair. The implication is that this is the same girl that the singer is trying to find, and her fairness is in contrast to the ugliness and horror of Mordor. It's also suggested that it indicated that this meeting, which doesn't happen in the books itself, this is a kind of elaboration or divergence from Tolkien. But like a Galadriel or a Luthien sort of character in the Silmarillion, or a Goldberry. Goldberry would be a good example. The effect she has on the hobbits is one of ravishing beauty, which captivates them. They're in awe. There's a kind of magnetism that draws them to this woman. Same with Luthien. Beren is just drawn to her beauty, which is is a revelation of the light, of the transcendent, of all that's good in the world, is seen in this perfect form. And this woman, who's so fair, has this effect for the singer here. And this again is another theme that we'll see repeated throughout. A beautiful woman who, in virtue of not just her physical beauty, that is a manifestation of her glorious character, which is so warm and inviting. And you feel safe and want to be want to serve her. That will be repeated in other songs. Indeed, it's a really key feature of Tolkien's work. But I think the best guy who does this is George MacDonald. If you've read The Princess and the Goblin, or The Princess and Curdie, or um, the Golden Ring, is it? The Golden Key, sorry, the Golden Key. Those are filled with women who he's just brilliant at writing these beautiful women who evoke such emotion from you. And that is who is featured here in the Heart of Mordor. So if we move on to the next couple of verses. But Gollum and the evil one crept up and slipped away with her, and there's nothing I can do now. I guess I'll keep on. So again, this isn't something which literally happens in the Lord of the Ring. There is no woman who's stolen by Gollum in the Heart of Mordor. That would be quite some fan fiction. But we can read this in various different ways. First, Gollum is the creature, the hobbit who through murder gained the One Ring of Power, and it devoured him. It left him an empty husk, which both loved and hated the ring. He was possessed by lust for it, even though he hated his lust for it. And eventually he ends up betraying Frodo, who he's sworn an oath to serve, and takes the ring from him. However, in the process of taking the ring, of biting Frodo's finger off, in his jubilation, he falls to his death in the fires of Mount Doom, and thereby destroys the ring. A happy fault, we might say. But Gollum is a split personality, or at least he is one personality. Smeagol is the original hobbit. He's the original person who the ring ensnared, and Gollum is that side of him who lusts for the ring, who is kind of created by the ring in his place. And so we might see here that Gollum, who's a liar, a thief, but ultimately very possessive of the ring, is the man himself in some way or another. Perhaps he was overly possessive of this woman. He wanted her to be his, to rule her, as it were, that she was his own when she wasn't. And so that side of him, so overbearing, meant that she got away from him. That could be one interpretation. Another could be that another man who was maybe a liar, or deceptive in some way, or a thief, because Gollum is a thief, managed to take this woman from the singer here for his own. Either way, there's this idea that there's a malevolent creature which is almost a twin of the singer, just as Frodo and Gollum are kind of parallels of each other, aided the demonic in some way or another. Because the evil one sounds like a reference to Sauron, could be Satan. So the Dark Lord was aided by this twisted side of human being, the possessive side, the desire for riches which are not ours to own, or things that are not ours to have, aided the losing this most beautiful and wonderful girl. And when I mention possessiveness, I'm hammering this point home because for Tolkien, creatures are made to engage in what he would call subcreation. That is, we are to respond to reality by engaging with it and reforming it in various ways, in ways which are consonant with the divine plan. So we might take a precious metal and form it into a jewel. But what's important with that is we have to acknowledge that these things, indeed, including ourselves, are all the product of the creator, of the God. And so they do not belong to us. We are not the gods of the things we make. Rather, we have the pleasure of making them in the service of the God who rules all things. And time and again, evil comes about in The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion by creatures who think that they have a right to rule as gods, things that they have made or things that they want to claim as their own. And so there is a sense here that, and Tolkien would see this for people, relationships as well, that oftentimes it can be changed into oftentimes we can become so possessive of another person, we do not allow their own individuality and freedom, but seek to bring it all into our small mental boxes, as it were. And so I think whether this is the singer himself or somebody else, there is a very strong connection between Gollum, between the possessiveness of Gollum and losing this woman. And so he's going to keep wandering after her. And he talks about, I got to find my baby, I got to ramble on, sing my song, got to work my way going around the world. He's going to scour the whole earth to find this woman once again, which gave him such joy and elation, such safety and security in the heart of darkness. And as you can see, I can't stop this feeling in my heart. It's a deep yearning. It's probably the most primal thing he has in his life. That's why he needs to leave the comfort that we saw in the beginning. He must confront this yearning, which causes very much suffering as he searches the world, and overcome evil to achieve finding this woman. There's an interest, Julius Flavius, hello to you, sir. And hello to you, CM Piano, as well. Good to see you. So Julius Flavius has a very interesting interpretation of the end I hadn't spotted, but I think it's plausible. So we see here, every time I think about my baby, I think we got to part. Got to keep on searching for my baby, 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 baby. I keep on searching for my baby. I can't find my bluebird. I listened to what my bluebird said, but I can't find my bluebird. I keep rambling, baby. He suggests that in this whole part of the song here, that the singer is almost Gollum, searching for his precious. And he has that kind of driving lust, which he's responding to the call of the ring. So he heard his baby, heard his bluebird, but he can't find it anywhere. I think, and as we know, Gollum does leave the Misty Mountains, the Mines of Moria, and goes over the whole earth. He goes to Mordor to find the ring. So this is a very plausible interpretation. I could definitely see that as being one way of reading the song. The other is that he's trying to overcome himself in some way, or he's just Gollum has taken away this thing, and so he's trying to re-find her. Either way would work. So that is Ramble On, and I appreciate we've spent quite a bit of time on that. But I think it sets up a lot of the key themes that we're going to be looking at as we move through the various songs. So that is our first Led Zeppelin song. Before we move on to the next one, I'll just give a second for any comments or questions that have come in. Let me just see, what have people been saying? Yes, Tricky Who, unfortunately, we won't be looking at the Stones or Beatles today, but I do think that is a very good point. And something maybe for another day. It's a bit beyond my knowledge, the Masons, to be honest. So, yes. Ah, yes. I play Paranoid too, my friend. Maybe we should reform a band, eh? Let's see. Wander and Wanderer. Yes. It's a good. I think the play on words there is very important, isn't it? It's a certain attitude as well as the physical journey. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Vingle. I'm very pleased I have some decent finish. Very minor point, but the I tell you no lie reminds me of the Sabbath. Fairies wear boots, and you gotta believe me. I saw it. I saw it. I tell you no lies. Yes, yes, I can see that. I can see that. Black Sabbath is being referred to here. Um, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, it's just not true. Not true at all. I can see how if somebody's just read the Lord of the Rings, they might see that because it's really from the other material that you understand that the world is brimming with just with life of various forms. But I no, you can see it in the Lord of the Rings. I mean, the very fact that mountains have character should and trees have character should tell you that. Um, Golem is modern man. The base nature takes priority over the self, which is put into the background. Again, I think this is something we'll come on to in a future song, but certainly for Robert Plant, there is this strong uh, contrast between the attitudes of modernity with the emphasis upon acquiring material wealth and possessions and fame and glory, and with the spiritual or the realization of um, our highest form in various ways. So yes, I can see that as well. Um, but I think Gollum is particularly apt for that because of his possessiveness, which can characterize the materialism or the drive for materialism in modern man, as you put it. Um, so yeah, it probably could have done with removing some of those, but before we move on, uh, yes, well, paranoid. That's a very interesting. The very fact that it could be on a syllabus for rock guitar that raises questions of its own, I suppose. But Vingle asks a very good question. Battle of Evermore next. Well, you have preempted me, my friend. You have preempted me. Of course, it had to be this song. This had to feature at some point. The Battle of Evermore. It's on Led Zeppelin 4, and uh, again, I'm going to go through the lyrics, and we'll dissect bits here and there. The Queen of Light took her bow, and then she turned to go. The Prince of Peace embraced the gloom and walked the night alone. Oh, dance in the dark of night, sing to the morning light. The Dark Lord rides in force tonight, and time will tell us all. First, can I just say that what a beautiful set of lyrics that is. It made my soul leap just to say them. But let's start at the beginning. The Queen of Light took her bow. So this is a Luthien-like figure, or Melian, um, a beautiful woman who reveals the transcendent, who light illuminates the world. So this is somebody who is a positive presence compared to the Dark Lord. So darkness shrouds the world. We cannot see properly. Um, it, we cannot find our way in the darkness. We can in the light. Again, light is associated with heat, with warmth, given the sun. And as we'll see in this song, the sun and the light are being very strongly connected here. And warmth, well, we feel warmth. We feel good when we are in the presence of such a person, like the beautiful woman that he found in Mordor. And again, this is then associated with comfort, with peace, with contentedness, compared to a dark lord who brings fear, depression, despair, etc. She took her bow, so she's arming for battle. And she turned to go, and the Prince of Peace embraced the gloom. So the Prince of Peace, well, this is a title of Christ, of course. In Isaiah, the Prince of Peace, the promised Messiah will be the Prince of Peace. And this epithet gets put onto Jesus Christ. And so what does this Christological character do? He embraced the gloom and walked the night alone. Well, we've just been celebrating last week the passion and resurrection of Christ. And Christ took upon himself the sins of the world and was crucified upon the cross for that. And he was dead and he descended into hell. He vanquished Satan there and led the captured saints there to freedom via the resurrection. But in that, he solely took on that challenge. He uniquely took on the sins of the world and faced the forsakenness. He walked the night alone, as it were. He took on the great suffering and darkness in himself. And I think that's being a picture that's being painted here. And so, dance in the dark of night, sing to the morning light. The Dark Lord rides in force tonight, and time will tell us all. So we have here the connection of light to the morning. So the dawn, so the rising of the sun. And so whereas the darkness, that is the nighttime or the setting of the sun. So the battle that's going on here is the darkness of night versus the light of morning or of the day. And this is a cycle which goes on forever. Every day and every night the sun rises and sets. So this is a battle for evermore, as it were. And this very much connects with many mythologies. Perhaps one of the most famous or significant is Egyptian mythology, where the god Ra, arguably the head god, in his boat rides across the sky. And this is the sun, or carrying the sun. And every dusk, he goes down into the underworld and is confronted by Apep, this serpent-like god. Of course, serpents being connected with the sea and chaos and drowning the world in darkness. And he seeks to defeat Ra every night. He seeks to swallow up his boat or destroy it or prevent them from escaping hell or the underworld. He fails on a daily basis. He's always defeated, but there's always that prospect that one time, and that's all he needs, one time, Apep or Apep will be victorious, and then all the world will be shrouded in darkness. Life will wither away without the power of the sun, and all the structures we know will become dissolute, and, well, Apep's reign will go on forever. An endless darkness of gloom and nothingness. So this is very much the battle that's going on in this song between Ra and Apep, or the sun and the darkness. And so we are to dance in the night. We are to sing, and this is to the morning light. So again, it's this idea that singing has some kind of power, some kind of ability to throw back forces in various ways. Indeed, if we think of somebody like Martin Luther, who was a great hymn writer, he believed that his hymns had the power to exorcise demons from people's souls, that they had a spiritual force that could change the world. And in a sense, until morning comes, this song that this singer is going to sing is his weapon against the darkness, as is his dance. And if we wanted to make a very maybe tenuous connection, the dancing in the dark, well, you do have in the Christian hymn, and we've already had a Christian reference, but the Christian hymn, the Lord of the Dance, And this idea that the dancing will never die is one of the lines in that. That even though the Lord of the Dance, Christ, was crucified, his dance will go on forever and is indeed the very rhythm of life. So there is perhaps a connection somewhere here between the continuing of dancing, which is arguably one of the most life affirming activities. You feel filled with vitality when you dance, especially with another. Then uh like a ceilidh or in a club or something like that, fully dancing, then the darkness of that's associated with death cannot be victorious, or it can be staved off for some time. So then we move on to the next couple of verses. Oh, throw down your plough and hoe. Rest not to lock your homes. Side by side we wait the might of the darkest of them all. I hear the horses thunder down in the valley below. I'm waiting for the angels of Avalon, waiting for the eastern glow. So, oh, throw down your plough and hoe. To me, this is very much an inversion of the promises of Isaiah. We've already had the Prince of Peace, right? So again, in Isaiah, there's the promise that the swords and the weapons, when the King comes, when the Lord comes, these weapons will be turned into pruning hooks and hoes, things that you can farm with rather than fight with. But the singer here is telling us, no, this is not the time for that. It is not time to be. We are not in the glorious reign of the Prince of Peace. Actually, we need to turn these things. We need to abandon these things and get ready to fight. Indeed, we cannot just stay in our homes. We must go out and confront. And again, this goes back to the Rambler that we saw in the last song, who will not just stay in his place, but must go out and confront the darkness in the hope of finding the beautiful woman. He hears the horses thunder down in the valley below. So we've got knights here on the ride, and he's waiting for the angels of Avalon. So Avalon, this is a reference to the promise that of King Arthur, his abode, where one day Arthur will return to Britain out of the mists of time, restoring a golden age, or bringing about a golden age, finally overturning evil within Britain and restoring it to what it ought to be. So this is a hope for deliverance, a hope that even though we are in the midst of darkness, that there will be an intervening force, something which is capable of overthrowing the darkness. And indeed, we see in the next line, waiting for the eastern glow. Well, the sun rises in the east. So again, we've got this connection to the everlasting battle between day and night. He's waiting for the day to come. And this is a kind of Arthurian eschaton that he's looking for. And again, there's connections with the messianic return of Jesus in the second coming as well. That's the Arthurian legend prefigures that in many ways. So again, dance in the dark of night, sing to the morning light. The apples, which previously the apples of the valley hold the seeds of happiness, the ground is rich from tender care. These apples, which could again be a reference to the Edenic apples or fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, this paradise, these have turned to brown and black. The tyrant's face is red. So, I mean, again, great use of color here, brown, black, and red, with light and night. It's very evocative. But the apple's turning. So in the last song, we saw that it's now autumn, that the leaves are falling from the trees. Again, this sense is here that summer, that golden summer that we all enjoyed, maybe the 1960s, that's gone. That's gone. The time is gone. Things are in decay now. The happiness that once was, it is withered. It is rotting even. and the tyrant's face is red. O war is the common cry. Pick up your swords and fly. The sky is filled with good and bad that mortals never know. So we're at battle. We are to go and fight now. We're to dance and sing in our fighting. And the sky is filled with good and bad. So again, we've been talking about the sun and its conquest against the night. But there's also spiritual forces, which mortals never know, that are fighting within this battle. You could think of in the Odyssey, or the Iliad, sorry. Much of the conflict, although it's taking place historically amongst humans, is also a conflict between the Greek pantheon of different gods, Poseidon and Zeus, and so on. Also, in the Christian tradition, you have demonic forces fighting against angelic forces, both within the soul, but also on a cosmological level. It used to be thought that planets are actually guided by angels or controlled by angels, in some way, or a manifestation of angels. Indeed, weather formations or patterns can be the result of spiritual activities. So we see here that, and if you connect that with the sun, which is itself something associated with these battles, again, Ra and Apep, and so on, then the sky is filled with good and bad that mortals never know, is tying in the whole cosmos into this mythological context. Oh well, the night is long, the beads of time pass slow. Tired eyes on the sunrise, waiting for the eastern glow. So again, it's this hope and anticipation that even if in the darkest moments, there is the promise of deliverance with the day. And we could even see this with Tolkien's idea of eucatastrophe. And I think so. For Tolkien, eucatastrophe is something that he talked about in his lecture on fairy stories, and he sees it as the heart of a good fairy story. It's a narrative structure in which characters are brought to the brink of despair and desperation, given it looks like a oncoming evil is going to overwhelm them, and evil will be victorious. There'll be a final defeat of all that's good, and then an unexpected, miraculous, good will overturn that. And this deliverance, never to be looked for again, is so wonderful and so surprising that it arouses a joy which is so poignant that it goes beyond the walls of the world. In a sense, whether Plant and Page knew of this concept, they could see it in the writing of The Lord of the Rings. And so this hope for the Eastern glow, akin to Aragorn waiting for the sunrise at Helm's Deep for Gandalf and Erkenbrand to appear. That promise of there will be deliverance, that's what they're holding on to, the possibility of eucatastrophe, potentially, of this turning. However, in this song, it's an everlasting battle. It goes on forevermore. So it's not as unexpected in some ways, or it's at least, or Plant's trying to merge different concepts which aren't totally consistent. Perhaps it's a song; it doesn't have to be. So moving on, the pain of war cannot exceed the woe of aftermath. The drums will shake the castle wall. The ring wraiths ride in black. Ride on. So the ring wraiths, these are creatures from the Lord of the Rings. They were once kings of men who were given rings of power by Sauron and were thus enslaved by him to do his bidding. And they have become essentially they have lost all visible form. They are completely invisible, becoming nothing but servants to his will, only known by their black hoods. And they are ring wraiths insofar as both that they are enslaved by the rings that they were given, that they were greedy and took them from a malevolent force, but they are also hunting for the one ring. And they are wraiths insofar as they cannot be seen. They have withered away to almost nothingness because of their evil. And they always cause or bring with them the feeling of hopelessness and overwhelming dread. And so that these creatures are around the castle walls. There are kind of a couple of things here. I think somebody's already mentioned it. Vingle, you mentioned how this could be a reference to the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and certainly the Ringway wraiths were present there, so we can see that. And surrounding Minas Tirith, the walls there, so there could be a reference to that. But it's also more broadly the concept of the night, this place of darkness and death. These are the personification of that thing. They are the night made flesh, I suppose. They are the night incarnate, and they bring with it or manifest all its most horrible aspects. The cold shiver that they bring. I also wondered if the drums that will shake the castle wall could be a reference to the drums that the goblins play in the mines of Moria, drums in the deep. There's an interesting line here: the pain of war cannot exceed the woe of aftermath. I'm not going to touch on that here, but we will come back to it in a later song. Although I must press on because we've got, as you can see in the tabs at the top, we've got a lot to get through, and we've already done 1.5 songs here. Maybe we'll have to do more another time. So, sing as you raise your bow, shoot straighter than before. No comfort has the fire at night that lights the face so cold. So again, you're engaged in combat when you sing. It has a spiritual impact upon the world, or a real impact on the world. And indeed, this is an idea which has Pythagorean roots fundamentally. For Pythagoras, all music, due to its the relationships between objects or in objects that produce sound, the ratios that produce sound, can either be consonant with the proportions and ordering of the universe, or they can be out with it. And in that respect, they can also manipulate the world in various ways. And so if you think of darkness and as the thing which kind of is going to cover and undo the order of the world, good songs or harmonious songs re-establish order. They defend it. They re-instantiate it, just like spells do, or magic does when it is used rightly. It nourishes life and the order of the universe. So, and that's an interesting comment, not just within this song, but on songs in general. And I do think that there's some truth to this, that music can, by virtue of the emotion that it manifests through its rhythm and pitch, the kind of movement it makes, can affect us and instill within us certain virtues and vices. Take something like Elgar's Nimrod. That's supposed to, or it sounds noble, and it's supposed to evoke within us an experience of nobility in some way or another. Whereas something like Straight Out of Compton by NWA is a very angry, wrathful thing which encourages you to dehumanize and be very violent. And I think that's reflected not just in the lyrics, but in the music itself. And I don't think it's any surprise that certain kinds of music are celebrated in certain cultures, and those cultures have certain emotional tendencies or virtues and vices. So we could say here that actually it's not just singing any song; it's singing a song of power which fights against the darkness, just as the battle for Evermore is attempting to do in its own way in the present world. However, no comfort has the fire at night that lights the face so cold. So we might think, oh well, there's light and there's heat from this thing, from a fire, but it is no substitute for the sun, which is the only thing that can conquer the darkness of night. The fire can only has a small radiance. It's powerless ultimately against the darkness, or it has very little influence. So again, O dance in the dark of night, sing to the morning light. The magic runes are writ in gold to bring the balance back. At last the sun is shining, the clouds of blue roll by with flames from the dragon of darkness. The sunlight blinds his eyes. So we have here two more significant mythological ideas. The magic runes, so runes coming from the Norse tradition, and there's various stories about how Odin gained the runes or won the runes. Often they involve maybe giving up his eye um, uh, or his crucifixion on the world tree, some kind of sacrifice. But these runes again are the basis of language and thus of human civilization and order. And these are writ in gold to bring the balance back. So, what is the balance? Well, it's the balance of the recurring cycle of day and night. If one ever dominates, there is no longer balance between these two. So, this again is an interesting twist because we've been wanting the light to win throughout this song. But here, Plant puts in this idea of balance that actually we don't want the light to obliterate the night. We actually need both, which is I don't know if it's entirely consistent with the previous ideas. Perhaps it's a kind of yin and yang idea that we need darkness and light and darkness, and so on. And then we have with flames from the dragon of darkness. So dragons, again, if we think of Apep as a serpent, originally dragons and serpents were the same thing and connected as beings of destruction or personifications of the dangers of chaos and um, malevolent forces. We see them in Beowulf, we see them in Norse mythology, and one in particular that I was thinking of here was Nidhogg, who is the dragon whose escape from the roots of the world tree will herald Ragnarok, the end of the world. So he could be being referenced here, perhaps. And of course, Plant was a big fan of Norse mythology. We've already seen the runes, right? So there's so that is a possibility. But the sunlight blinds his eyes. So the sun again is victorious in this context, and so he is the great fighter, as it were, on behalf of the day, just like Rise. So yes. Oh, I see some comments in relation to this. So yes, that Yggdrasil, my pronunciation is not very good here. But yes, that is the world tree, the tree that all life comes from. And I saw a comment a second ago. Yeah, so these are the ravens of Odin, um, which bring him knowledge. Yes. I don't see a specific reference in here, but my knowledge of Norse mythology isn't the strongest, so I could be referencing a story I did that involves them. Yes, so the uh, the battle for Evermore, of Evermore, I should say. Before moving on to the next song, which will be our last Led Zeppelin song, just to give a second for any more comments related to this one. This is wonderful to hear, Vingle. It's the best way to do it. Honestly, the number of streams I listen to now with some kind of music playing, it's great. Really enlivens them, even if it's not relevant at all. And yes, I know I lowered the tone bringing in NWA, but one has to, right? Once in a while. Maybe we need to. No, we're not going to go there. I was about to say let's do an NWA stream one day. No, thank you. So before we move to our last song, I wanted to show this. So this is the inside cover of Led Zeppelin 4, and it's called the Hermit, and it's borrowed from a tarot card. This icon of the Hermit here, atop a kind of mountain or pillar. People have suggested that there's a wolf's head kind of in here, and down here, just right in the corner, you can see a little man, and he's petitioning the Hermit up here, perhaps, or crying out to him. And the Hermit, he has this lovely lantern, which I don't know if you can see it too well. I'll see if I can do that. It's got a star within it, a six-sided star, or is it a six-pointed star? I should say, maybe like a hexagram. We'll come to hexagrams later. So he's actually got a star there, a source of light, a source of hope within the darkness of night that this little man is crawling to. So we could see this is connected to the Battle of Evermore. And down here we've got a lovely castle or city with a river running towards it. Perhaps it could be something like Minas Tirith, but it's not clear. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and I love just what I've got this record on. Just having this open and just looking at it, it's beautiful. So let's come out of there, and we're moving now to our final Led Zeppelin song, "Stairway to Heaven." Surely it had to be to feature, right? Oh, I see. Sorry, Vingle. My mistake. Well, I'm glad you could hear it in your head. Anyway, maybe we'll be coming to things in people's heads in a second. So there's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. When she gets there, she knows if the stores are all closed, with a word, she can get what she came for. So let's start with one of the obvious points here. So this lady, she's sure that all that glitters is gold. Well, again, this sounds like a reference to Bilbo's comment, all that is gold does not glitter. It's a kind of inversion. It's not a direct parallel, because the direct parallel would be all that is gold glitters. But that's not what's said here. It's all that glitters is gold. So what we can see here is two things, perhaps. One is that this is a person who takes things on their material appearance. So if something looks good, then she assumes that they are good. And second, Bilbo's idea is all that is gold does not glitter. Well, this woman seems to assume, it's not said explicitly, but that anything which is gold or good is going to reveal itself in an obvious way. And this is perhaps reflected in her potential materialism. So this is a woman that thinks it's she thinks she can buy a stairway to heaven. She thinks she can actually pay for a way to salvation, as it were, the place of eternal rest and happiness. Um, we see this in our own culture, right? That um, essentially, if the ultimate thing is happiness, people try and buy their way to happiness by buying material things, or buying trips to go around the world, or paying money to do X, Y, and Z. They think they can purchase a thing which will be their stairway to heaven. Again, the idea of a stairway to heaven, one might connect it to the ladder that Jacob sees going to heaven in his dream, with the angels going up and down on it. And this has often been interpreted as Christ. Christ is the stairway to heaven. So there's also a sense in which she's buying, she wants to be able to buy Christ, which is, well, it's blasphemous. And we see in the New Testament, Simon Magus, a magician, tries to pay the apostles to teach him how to cast out demons and heal people. And they say, this is the power of God. How dare you try and buy it with money? These are illusions which I think are somewhere in the background here, that this is a really evil thing that she's trying to do. She's trying to buy that which is beyond any currency value. It's of infinite worth. She thinks she could put a price on it, just like she can buy a newspaper. This is something she can just do. And she thinks that she can just do it even if the stores are all closed. She may be somebody important in her own material existence and thinks, oh, well, when I get round to it, even though all the stores are all closed, even though it's late in the day to be doing this, I can purchase my stairway to heaven. So this suggests somebody who's not really thought about it as an important thing either. There's a sign on the wall, but she wants to be sure, because sometimes words have two meanings. The sign on the wall, this is perhaps a reference to the writing on the wall that Nebuchadnezzar is faced with. Nebuchadnezzar, one of the kings of Babylon in the Old Testament, he has been ruling wickedly and not giving due honor to God. And so, as he's having a feast, a hand appears and starts writing on the wall in script which nobody can interpret, and the wise men don't know what to make of it either. Only Daniel, the prophet Daniel, when he's brought before Nebuchadnezzar, is able to interpret it by the grace of God, and it's a warning that he needs to repent, or he will face great judgment from this. It may not actually be Nebuchadnezzar, now that I'm thinking of it. It might be his successor, I think. But either way, it's a Babylonian king, and there's a warning comes from the writing on the wall. And so there's a sign of the wall, but the words, they're not clear, just like the writing on the wall wasn't clear. She wants to have a sure interpretation. May also be, when you go to a shop, you see a sign on the wall giving you instructions, maybe how to buy your stairway to heaven. In our culture, and indeed back then, there was tons of people writing books on the ways to get to salvation, right? Or to self-help books that are going to make you happy and contented. She wants to find the right way because it does matter. She at least acknowledges that she wants to be sure she's going she has the right understanding in case she needs to have a stairway to heaven. In a tree by the brook, there's a songbird who sings, sometimes all of our thoughts are misgiven. So we're now moving away from the materialistic woman who tries to buy a stairway to heaven and thinks that everything that glitters is gold, basing her judgment on the material appearance of a thing rather than its spiritual character, to the natural world. the wholesome and beauty of a tree by the brook. There's a songbird who sings. So again, songs having power. And what is he singing? Sometimes all of our thoughts are misgiven, that what we think is not always what is true. And this is a refrain that's repeated, makes me wonder. Now, again, somebody earlier pointed out that there's a connection between wandering, like the Rambler, or rambling on, and wandering, having awe. Possessiveness, the possessiveness of Gollum, is the opposite of awe, which is appreciating the other for their own value and allowing them to flourish and inform your thoughts and your behavior and ideas. You let them be free in many ways. Wonder allows that freedom. And so perhaps this character is both wandering like Aragorn and wandering like Aragorn, as it were. He moves on. There's a feeling I get when I look to the west, and my spirit is crying for leaving. In my thoughts, I have seen rings of smoke through the trees and the voices of those who stand looking. So, this feeling I get when I look to the west, well, the west has often been described as the beyond this. If we look west across the sea, beyond there is the promised land or the heavenly realm, paradise. See this in Tolkien's mythology with the realm of the Valar in the west, and that is where Frodo departs for at the end of the books. He's going off into the Undying Lands, the place where there is no more suffering or pain. And Vingel also draws out Avalon, the place where Arthur is. That is the in the west. So this person is his spirit's crying to leave for this place. The current world that he's in, the modern world, the world where we think we can just buy our own happiness or heaven, does not satisfy his soul. Underneath that veneer or um, uh, superficial reality is something much deeper, a yearning which can only find its rest in the West, as it were, in the undying realm or Avalon. And this, again, I'm not sure Plant probably didn't know of this reference, but Saint Augustine in his Confessions famously spoke about how the heart can find no rest until it rests in you, O God. This is an idea that works itself throughout Christian theology, that we will ever be striving and seeking for contentment until we are finally in communion with the divine. And there's a sense in which this is also the case here, that all the distractions of the modern world, the beautiful glittery things that appear like they'll satisfy us, never can. It is only oneness with the divine or the transcendent, represented here by the West, beyond the sea. And you can see this in the book of Ecclesiastes very strongly. In his thoughts, so this isn't in the world itself, but in his thoughts, like dreams again, I have seen rings of smoke through the trees and the voices of those who stand looking. To be honest, this is the two lines I found the most difficult to kind of pin down specifically, but I did think, is this rings of smoke? This could be like the Saruman defiling the Fangorn forest and Isengard, cutting down nature, destroying it, and ravaging it. This is modernity destroying the natural world or violating those things which connect us or mediate between us and the divine in some way or another. And he also sees those, and hears the voices of those who stand looking. They do not intervene. They see it. They see this evil that's happening around us due to, I guess, modern materialism, but they're unwilling to actually intervene. And it made him wonder. It made him really wonder. And it's whispered that soon, if we all call the tune, then the piper will lead us to reason. And a new day will dawn for those who stand long, and the forests will echo with laughter. So just like in the Battle of Evermore, where there is the promise of a deliverance with the coming of the sun, with the coming of dawn. So it is whispered that there will be deliverance, and there will be a beautiful, kind of redemption, and this redemption is being heralded by the piper who plays music, and one thinks of the Pied Piper who, through his tunes, was able to take all the rats away into the sea, but also the children away from the town of those who were unjust and did not pay him. So the innocents, right? The Pied Piper, through his music, can save the innocents. He will take them away from injustice, from evil, and here it's to reason. Now, reason can just be limited in a kind of scientific sense to our faculty of understanding. But if the notion of the logos, which is both in Christianity and Neoplatonism, is that thing which orders reality, for Christians, Christ is the logos incarnate, then the piper's music, just like songs, right, for Pythagoras, they bring us back into harmony with the cosmos, and thus allow us to flourish and be most truly ourselves. So this piper is, through his powerful music, drawing us towards that which we ought to have rest in and communion in. And this will herald a new day, will dawn. So again, the dawn, for those who stand long, and the forest. So whereas the forest before, with kind of being tarnished with rings of smoke, and the voices of those who stand looking, now they will echo with laughter. And we could see a connection here with MacDonald's novel Lilith, where there are children in the forest. So again, the Pied Piper children, and they just love to laugh. They're the little people who laugh all the time, and it's perhaps a reference here, if we want to get very intertextual. And yes, Julius Flavius, my apologies. It is Hudons. I was meaning trees. Maybe I'll think of the old forest. So let's keep on. So here the music changes a bit. It gets more upbeat, and we hear, if there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed. Now it's just a spring clean for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. So the bustle in your hedgerow. So we could see a relationship here between Frodo and the hobbits standing at a hedgerow outside Bree, talking about being Mr. Underhill, tidying his name, and Aragorn being in the hedge, hearing this. But it's also this concept that, there's a clearing out going on here, in your mind or in your soul, or maybe in your environment. And this is being done by the May Queen. And the May Queen is often connected with the Queen of the Fairies, but also the Virgin Mary. So again, we're returning to this idea of the beautiful woman who mediates the divine. And then we move into the next section. There are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. What are these two paths? There's the path that the Pied Piper, or the Piper, is leading us on towards reason, towards the west, or there is the path pursued by the woman who thinks she can buy her stairway to heaven, which does not lead to the stairway to heaven. Maybe it's the escalator to hell. We could also connect this to the idea of Christ talks about there is only the narrow way by which you can follow him. And especially if we're thinking of the previous verse of the Virgin Mary, that would be a reasonable reference to put in here. So moving on to the next verse. Your head is humming and it won't go, in case you don't know. The piper's calling you to join him. So this tune that he's playing is in your head, it's in your mind. Is it the same as the spirit crying for leaving? The song and the desire are tied together. It's a call. And this idea we see in the Christian tradition of there being an external call through the preaching of the gospel to come to Christ. But there is also replicated with an internal call caused by the Holy Spirit. So we see the song and the movement within the soul as both as two sides of the same coin, as it were. And the very feelings that you feel when you're hearing these lyrics are the piper's call for you to join him. Dear lady, can you hear the wind blow? So this is the lady again who's been trying to buy her stairway to heaven. And the wind. So if we go back to Whispered, it's this idea that this call of the piper, this path towards the west and this true way to heaven, it's an elusive thing. It's something that you can't grasp or buy. It's something beyond being trapped in a small human box. And I think we can connect this again with in John chapter 3, the Gospel of John chapter 3, Christ talks about how the kingdom, those who belong to the kingdom of God are kind of born by the Holy Spirit, born by the wind. They come and go where they please. It is not known to the world where they originate from or where they are going. There's a similar sense here. And again, it's connected with the whispering wind. So it's a secret in some way. It's an elusive secret. So it could be interpreted as a kind of Gnostic idea in some way or another, a special form of knowledge. Your stairway lies on this whispering wind. You cannot buy it. It's not a material good. It's something more. It's something deeper than all of that. And then we have, as somebody has mentioned, the beautiful solo. Do the solo. I really wish I could do that for you, my friend, but I can't, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry. Maybe one day I could. I could try and sing it, but it would be awful. And this solo escalates us to. It's almost like it's bringing us towards the moment of decision. Which road are you going to be taking? It's almost at the point of no return, because as we saw earlier, the shops are now closed, the stores are closed. The time for making a decision is nigh at hand, and this connects to the previous two songs, right? The time is now. That's a constant refrain for Led Zeppelin, that we've got to act now and change now and fight the darkness now. And so as we wind on down the road, our shadows taller than our soul. So again, shadows being tall. This is the end of the day. We're near night now. The moment of death, as it were, is near. There walks a lady we all know, who shines white light and wants to show. So walks a lady. Could this be the May Queen that we heard about earlier? If she is like this divine sort of figure, she's showing us the way. She wants to help us to find this mythical path, as it were. How everything still turns to gold. So things can be transformed into the gold. It's not that everything that glitters is gold, it's that there are things which are beautiful and gold. And if you listen, they are of real value and beauty. If you listen very hard, the tune will come to you at last. This is the tune that the piper was playing, this yearning. It will be fulfilled when all are one and one is all. So this beautiful moment where there is true unity of all things. Indeed, this is the promised West, or the place he's looking for, to be a rock and not to roll. I mean, that's a brilliant play on words, but it's also this idea: you're a rock, you finally found your home, you're stationary, you're planted, you are thus fulfilled. You no longer need to keep wandering, you no longer need to keep rambling, as it were. But she's still buying a stairway to heaven. That's the final lyric. Almost in despondent way that it's said there. So that is Stairway to Heaven. I'll give you all a second just to catch up. Let's see what folks have been saying. I'm seeing a lot of chat about people that don't like the Tolkien in Led Zeppelin. That's a shame. Everybody can enjoys it in their own way, I suppose. But this is something I think many people do enjoy or find interesting. The kind of references and reverberances that are being drawn here, and exploring those in different ways. You can sing this flawlessly. That sounds wonderful. Hopefully, we'll get you on one day, Vingle, to do that. Yes, it's great, isn't it? Well, each to their own. Zeppelin cheetah. I think for me, what's beautiful is there's not a definite meaning. Everything I'm suggesting is just one way of interpreting it, or a few ways of interpreting it, and seeing at least some of the intended ideas behind these songs, and how they connect with other mythological ideas too. But so that's what we've got for the next hour or so more. So strap in your seatbelt if you're not enjoying it. Right. Okay. So one more here. So I think there's a reference to Gandalf being like a rock, not able to gather moss for the duration of his career, before he parts way with the hobbits to learn from Bombadil. I may be wrong. Well, hold that thought, Fingal, because in a little while, or quite a while, we will come to Gandalf, who is very explicitly the source of a couple of songs. And this idea of him wandering and not establishing roots or being tied to a place is very important in those songs. But let us move forward to Wishbone Ash. And all of the songs that we're going to be looking at are from Argus, which is a fantastic album. And I think already what we can see in this image is much of what we've been talking about. So this character, we don't know who he is. He looks like a warrior. He's looking out across the plains. They're somewhat foggy, somewhat misty. So there's a sense of expectation and hope, and going into the unknown, discovering something new. We'll see that in their lyrics. We've already seen it in Led Zeppelin to a certain degree. We're going to start with the song Warrior. And that character that we've just seen could be the titular character here. I'm leaving to search for something new, leaving everything I ever knew. 100 years in the sunshine hasn't taught me all there is to know. So just like in Ramble On, there's this sense that the character has been in a place of comfort, in a place of an almost paradise. It's time to move on. 100 years in the sunshine. So it's been a great place that he's been, but he hasn't. There's things there that he cannot learn there. There are truths about himself, about the world. There are things he cannot grow in certain ways if he stays in this place. And so he has to leave to search for that thing which will make him grow, that knowledge which he can only get by leaving paradise, as it were. And so he's leaving everything behind. He's going into the total unknown here. This is and my theory is much of the lyrics that we'll see from Wishbone Ash, which are great, and the music is great, but I think they were heavily influenced by Led Zeppelin 4, or very strongly influenced by Led Zeppelin. Anyway, so in the valley, we will gather there, helpless in our surrender. Tomorrow the plough becomes the sword, make us stronger in our danger. So this is where they're headed, into the valley. We will gather there. So it's not just this individual by himself. It sounds like all of the seekers or the people who want to know more will gather in this place. And they're not going to be able to put up much resistance. Apparently, they're going to be in some kind of conflict or combat when they enter this unknown. Tomorrow, the plough becomes the sword. So, again, going back to the Battle of Evermore, putting aside the ploughs and hoes and picking up weapons, right? It's an inversion of Isaiah again. But they're going to be unable to resist. Even though they hope for strength in the danger, actually they're going to be helpless in surrendering to this force. Time will pass away. Time will guard our secret. I'll return again to fight another day. So we have here this idea that the passage of time, or even time itself, is going to disappear. So this is very eschatological. The notion that at the end of the world, time will come to a halt or end, and with it, the old order will pass away, and a new creation will be born, one in everlasting company with God, or eternity, as it were. And so when time passes away, well, with it, all of the darkness of the old order will be gone, and thus the mistakes of the past, or the evil of our past, those things that we have done wrong, will be also passed away. So time will guard our secret, right? And this could be our helpless surrender, where we've just been defeated. However, this surrender could be seen as making us stronger in our danger, whereas paradise didn't allow us to grow, whereas this threat, this danger, does. And perhaps this is connected to the idea, I'll return again to fight another day. So when this end of times comes, when time passes away, this character, a messianic character perhaps, is reborn, whereas before they were unable to resist evil, they were helpless. Now they are ready to fight. They have gone through death. That's the implication. Returning from, they have been killed in some way or another, or maimed or suffered, and now they are ready to overcome. And what are they going to be? They're going to be a warrior. They're not going to be a slave anymore. They're going to be a soldier and a conqueror, fighting to be free. So this character now, having gone through the way of death, gone through hell, as it were, they are now ready to liberate reality. They couldn't do that if they had stayed 100 years in the sunshine more. They had to leave there. They had to go through the darkness to be able to liberate and bring light. So that is the first of the songs. But let's now move to throw down the sword, which is almost a companion piece, I think, in some ways to Warrior, but a wee bit later in the kind of following on from it. So let's just imagine for a second that the warrior has returned and he's had his great conflict. Well, he is now told, throw down the sword. The fight is done and over. Neither lost, neither won. To cast away the fury of battle and turn my weary eyes for home. There were times when I stood at death's own door, only hoping for an answer. Throw down the sword and leave the glory, a story time can never change. To walk the road, the load I have to carry, a journey's end, a wounded soul. There were times when I stood at death's own door, only searching for an answer. There's a few interesting themes here. The first is the idea that the battle has been completed, or the war has been completed, but there is in some way no victory to be won here. That those who come from the battle are scarred in some way. They must return to home. Whereas home, well, it could be this heavenly place we've been speaking about, or it could literally be home. And to walk the roads, the load I have to carry, a journey's end, a wounded soul. This all sounds very reminiscent of Frodo's experience after destroying the ring, that he is marred in some way. And I wanted to read a short passage, or a passage or two, from J.R.R. Tolkien's letters, because in one of his letters, letter 246, in response to a Mrs. Eileen Elgar, he discusses Frodo's failure to destroy the ring. That actually, at the final moment, he claims it as his own, and he, as a consequence, he must have felt that he had been broken in some way, and he discusses it here. Frodo appears at first to have had no sense of guilt. He was restored to sanity and peace. But then he thought that he had given his life in sacrifice. He expected to die very soon. But he did not, and one can observe the disquiet growing in him. Arwen was the first to observe the signs, and gave him her jewel for comfort, and thought of a way of healing him. Slowly he fades out of the picture, saying and doing less and less. I think it is clear on reflection to an attentive reader that when his dark times came upon him and he was conscious of being wounded by knife, sting, and tooth, and a long burden, notice that word, burden again, it was not only nightmare memories of past horrors that afflicted him, but also unreasoning self-reproach. He saw himself and all that he done as a broken failure. Quote, though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. That was actually a temptation out of the dark, a last flicker of pride, desire to have returned as a hero, not content with being a mere instrument of good. And it was mixed with another temptation, blacker and yet, in a sense, more merited, for however that may be explained, he had not in fact cast away the ring by a voluntary act. He was tempted to regret its destruction and still to desire it. Quote, it is gone forever, and now all is dark and empty, end quote, he said as he wakened from his sickness in 1420. So there is this sense of loss and being wounded by the conflict that one has been through. And indeed, we see this in various mythological archetypes. Jacob is wounded in the hip after his wrestling with God. Odin has to give up an eye for great knowledge. Frodo's finger is literally bitten off. But these are all reflective of a spiritual or character being bearing the marks of their conflict and carrying home that pain. So in a sense, although the battle is over and that's to be done for, actually going home, it's not as glorious as one might think. The readjustment to the ordinary life after the spiritual conquest or military conquest is one fraught with hurt. There is also this other idea of when I was at death's own door, only hoping for an answer. We're not told what the question is as such, but it's this. If we think back to Led Zeppelin for a second here, with this whispering, piping tune calling us in various towards contentment, then if this character's searching for an answer when he's confronted with death, he's looking for the meaning of things. He's looking for what he's always been looking for, I suppose, in one way or another, and perhaps even only at the door of death, only with darkness on hand, only with our shadows growing taller than ourselves, that we can actually discover it. It's only passing through that door. So that is Throw Down the Sword. Before I move on, I just wanted to highlight a comment that Vingel made in reference to Gandalf being a rolling stone, and he's quoting here from the books. I'm going to have a long talk with Bombadil. This is Gandalf. He is a moss gatherer, and I have been a stone doomed to rolling, but my rolling days are ending, and now we shall have much to say to one another. To be a rock and not to roll in Stairway. Yes, and so I think that's a very apt that's essentially commenting on that point, and could be an influence there, for sure. But in a sense, that would imply that Gandalf is becoming a rock. He's finding his place of rest, rather than being a rolling stone. So yes, I think that's a very good point that you make, Fingal. So we're going to come to one final Wishbone Ash song here, which is "The King Will Come," and this is a great song. I really, really love this song. It's one of my favorites on the album. I think the beginning is beautiful. Or beautiful is maybe the wrong word. It's just super, like, militaristic, exciting, vibrant. It's got a real military drum kind of going in the background with the guitar solo over the top. If you've not heard it, listen to it, man. It's great. And the lyrics are also super. So, in the fire, the king will come. Thunder rolls, piper and drum. Evil sons overrun, count their sins, judgment comes. So when I was reading up and researching this, it seems very clear to a lot of commentators that this song is influenced by the biblical book of Revelation. Hence why I've been connecting earlier songs by Wishbone Ash to various biblical passages. And in that book comes the judgment of the world. God brings the end of days, and the righteous and the wicked will get their just deserts. They will all be judged. The righteous will receive heaven, get to spend eternity with God, worshipping and praising Him. The wicked, the evil sons that are referenced here, their sins will be counted against them, and they will be condemned in the fire, as it were. The king, that is God, more specifically Jesus Christ, who will return and overthrow the forces of darkness. This is heralded by thunder rolling. So this is maybe a connection to something like Jupiter and Zeus having that power. So too does the heavenly Lord. Piper and drum. Well, we've been speaking about pipers earlier. This is another reason why I think Led Zeppelin were an influence on Wishbone Ash. They mention the piper again. The piper's leading us towards the victorious divine. The checkerboard of nights and days. Again, we've been talking about the Battle of Evermore, the conflict between nights and days, well, they're going to end with when the king comes, because the old creation will be overturned and the new creation, the union of heaven and the new heaven and new earth, will come together. And yes, Julius Flavius, that is precisely. Jesus will see what you hide and pay you according to your deeds. Revelation 2:23. So judgment comes. Jesus delivers to each his due. He's also going to overturn the old creation of nights and days, the ongoing. It's finally going to come to an end. Man will die, man be saved. So all men will undergo resurrection on the last day. But there's also an idea that those who give up their life for Christ, who die to the world in that sort, or die to themselves, will be saved as well. The sky will fall, the earth will pray when judgment comes to claim its day. So the sky falling, all of the things we take for granted, all the structures of the world, indeed the very cosmos, will be undone in its basic nature. A new reign will begin. This is going to be terrifying, and the earth is going to be praying for mercy. All peoples will be looking for hope. It's a terrible thing when the Lord returns to the earth. It will be of filling with awe and dread. See the word of the prophet on a stone in his hand, poison pen, revelation, or just a sign in the sand. So this word of the prophet, could this be the word of the writer of the book of Revelation? On a stone in his hand. So this could be a connection to Moses, who famously received from God on Mount Zion. Mount Sinai, sorry. Mount Sinai, he received the on 2 tablets of stone the law, the 10 commandments. So this could be Moses kind of proclaiming the way. Poison pen revelation. To be honest, I have no idea what they're talking about on this point. Poison pen, I'm not sure. Or just a sign in the sand. Well, famously, Jesus, in one of the events of his life, was writing in the sand various things. At the same time, the sand is something fluctuating, and when the wind blows, that sign will be gone. It's this idea of the elusiveness, like the whispering wind of the message. So again, we can see with Wishbone Ash across their songs, like Led Zeppelin, a very strong idea of eschatology, of deliverance from darkness, that there is a kind of transcendent realm or place where there is some fulfillment, that there is a strong use of biblical themes and tropes, whereas I think with Led Zeppelin there's also more integration with fantastical and mythological. With Wishbone Ash it is very biblical, but I think perhaps an interesting difference, we've not seen any of these beautiful women yet in Wishbone Ash that are a key feature in Led Zeppelin. And then also there is well, we saw in the last one, Throw Down Your Sword, that the actual spiritual conflict may not result in contentment. Whereas for Led Zeppelin, it very much is a full deliverance. So I'm just going to move forward to the next one. But before we go into War Pigs by Black Sabbath, I just want to check if anyone has any questions or comments. So, true, the battle is lost for the forces of order. The modern world shall not be punished. It is the punishment. Amen. That is very true, Julius Flavius. And indeed, that is very much embodied in the character of the woman buying her stairway to heaven. It is her own punishment. She's going to reap her own reward. And I suppose as well, it's this but it's also one that, as you say, it's ever on, it's ever going, and it's difficult to um, in this life. It's ever difficult to find true resolution, because as soon as one conflict is over, you're on to the next one. That's in your own life, in your own community, in the cosmos in general. It's only with the king coming that they will be totally overturned. And I'm glad I'm giving you some good rest, Fingal, I must say. Uh, we're here for all services, including sleep. So, before I move on, I just want to remind folks again that uh, you're able to send super chats, I believe, and you're also able to become a member of the channel. Neither of these things are obligations or burdens, I hope, for anybody. It's rather, if you just want to give something to support the channel and help me to grow it more and invest in it, then that would be greatly appreciated. Indeed, my hope is in the future, if the channel grows to a large enough size, that I'll be able to use memberships as a way to access to kind of university level courses that I would run on the channel. Ones including one idea is kind of an introduction to theological themes in Tolkien and Lewis. Others might include Spanish mysticism, or the monstrous and theology in 19th century novels, things like that. But it's only going to be able to do that if it grows to a certain size. So if you want to support that sort of thing, then it'd be very much appreciated. So moving on to Black Sabbath War Pigs, and there's been some mention of Black Sabbath already in the chat, people talking about playing Paranoid and all that sort of thing. Certainly my band, so I was in two bands. One, I think I mentioned, was the Yellow Hammers. That was my first one, and we really played kind of Rolling Stones and Muddy Waters blues sorts of things. But then my second one, which was A Matter of Urgency, it was called that because we hadn't come up with a name, and we had about half an hour before the school concert. I know we were so rebellious, right? Playing at the school concert. So we just called it A Matter of Urgency. We played War Pigs quite a bit, and we loved it. So I don't think all of this song is particularly related to the mythological or transcendent, and there are other songs which maybe do, but I wanted to focus on this one from Black Sabbath because it's one of the more well-known ones, and there are elements of the fantastical within it, and it's a really good tune. I think one of the things with Black Sabbath I find is that some of their stuff is really, really great, and some of it is of a lesser quality. But I think in part that's because they just churned out so much in such a short amount of time. I think their first album was recorded in a day, which is insane. It's an amazing achievement. I should also say as well, I when I was in this band, I lived not far from where Black Sabbath were based, which was in Aston. And that's where they were from. They were from Birmingham. So there was always that affinity too. But anyway, that's besides the point. So generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses, evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. In fields the bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh Lord, yeah. So generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. So this is an association of military commanders, those who direct war, with covens and evil rites of witches. Now, it's an important point to make here that although Black Sabbath are often associated with the satanic, none of their members have ever ascribed to Satanism. And two of them were Roman Catholics. The other two, I have no knowledge of them ever being into it. So this is a critical comment. It's not something to be applauded that generals are like witches worshipping Satan and doing horrible, blasphemous things. It's actually saying they're really evil. And we see it in the next line. Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. Now, to me, this sorcerer, I think there's an allusion here to Saruman the White. And I think this is in part because, as we'll see, I'll explain in a second. In the fields, the body's burning as the war machine keeps turning. So Saruman, Treebeard describes him as having a mind of metal and wheels. And we've already had a mind that plots destruction. We have a war machine that keeps turning, as in like a wheel that turns. And Saruman's policies are essentially death and hatred to mankind. He wants to destroy Rohan, absolutely, with his orcish hordes in a quest for domination and power. So the evil generals in our world are akin to a Saruman, who also, through his words, is able to poison people's minds. He uses Grima Wormtongue to incapacitate King Theoden. He uses his words later in dialogue with Theoden and Gandalf and Aragorn to enchant those who are with him and essentially get them to, well, he almost overcomes them via his words, poisoning them against the truth and horror of what he's done, almost getting them, convincing them that he should be let go and set free. And again, he tries this even in the Shire and manages for a time to do so, to poison the minds of somebody like what's his name, Lotho. So this character is these generals are very much like Saruman. And Julius Flavius, you make a very good point here. Saruman used his words on the Nazgul too. Sounded like his voice came from the walls. I think this was in the Unfinished Tales, Hunt for the Ring. Yes, so he has the power to, via his words, just like a song has power, Saruman's words or spells can mislead people. And if we think in these terms, is propaganda also a spell which deliberately casts an illusion over the mind, which deliberately enchants somebody to act in ways that they don't really understand or cannot see the truth? Should we see it in terms of magic or a form of magic, that these people evilly cast illusions over our eyes so that we cannot see? And often they are tied to the military industrial complex, which is constantly trying to advance technologies towards transhumanism, which is constantly seeking opportunities to burn bodies in fields and cause great evil. And they often meet at conferences, world conferences. I couldn't say which conferences, of course. But yeah, maybe we shouldn't see them as technocrats. Maybe we should see these people as kind of dark wizards or magicians in some way. And we might recognize the seriousness of the threat a little more. As somebody said earlier, let's see. Yes, Julius Flavius. So these politicians hide themselves away. They only started the war. Why should they go out to fight? They leave that role to the poor. So whereas all of the previous songs have been about, spiritual fulfillment comes from fighting the darkness. Go out now and fight. These politicians don't do that. They're not pursuing the highest good. They're not looking for the West. They are hiding away and allowing others to die. A bit like Saruman, who does not go out to fight himself. He does not lead the Battle of Helm's Deep. He hides in Isengard. But I'm going to move to the final, or I should say, treating people just like pawns in chess. Wait till the Judgment Day comes. So again, Saruman He has this kind of idea of working over the whole, directing forces, playing with people's lives for his quest for power. And indeed, this is all in the end for his desire, which is to subdue the world to his knowledge and his way of ordering it. So it's very much, he has this grand master approach, which only the divine has the right to. But now in darkness, world stops turning. Ashes where the body's burning. So this is the judgment day that has been hoped for. And this is why I wanted to put this after the king will come. Because, again, it's a song about the end of days, about God judging the world. And it's very heavily Christian. And we see this, the day of judgment, God is calling, hand of God has struck the hour. So this is the same event that's being referred to. The war pigs no longer have power. They aren't able to control. And I should say as well, the idea of pigs having control sounds very similar to Animal Farm, of course. And that those who lead, who encourage war are less than human. So on their knees, the war pigs crawling, begging mercy for their sins. So whereas Wishbone Ash will put the emphasis on God bringing deliverance, here Black Sabbath, in light of their name, Satan, laughing, spreads his wings. Oh Lord, yeah. There's a kind of implication here that what Satan's about to do is butcher these these war pigs, and he's going to have a great time torturing them for all of the evil things that they've done in hell, while they are absolutely terrified of what's coming. So their emphasis on judgment is less upon the restoration of the world or the kind of joy of or rest that's found in God, and the absolute condemnation of what's going to come for the war pigs. So so I think that's a very good point then to move on to another song by Black Sabbath. So that was on their second album, War Pigs. The one we're turning to now, I believe, was on their first, which was The Wizard. The Wizard. And this song, I think, is just so heavily influenced by Gandalf. Before moving on, I should just see what people have said about War Pigs. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I just think it would be, even if you're balanced, then you can think about propaganda as a spell that you've rebuffed, maybe by your songs, maybe by the words you're able to speak against it. But we should see it as a spell or an incantation or a kind of demonic illusion, rather than just a piece of the product of the technocracy. I think that would lend it much more moral weight in some ways, as an evil. Yes, he's very excited, and I think Ozzy Osbourne is also excited that they're getting their comeuppance. That's interesting, Vingle. I didn't realize that there was much more in that, so maybe I'll go away and have a look at that afterwards. As you say, it's much more secular, and they've tried to restrain those elements. I suppose it needs to appeal to a wider audience, and but it still has that strong eschatology, which underpins the whole idea of Judgment Day. And yes, the Odinic figure, the wizard. So Gandalf is himself influenced by Odin, the wandering old man who appears here and there and influences the course of events in the world in various ways. So, The Wizard by Black Sabbath. Misty morning, clouds in the sky. Without warning, the wizard walks by, casting his shadow, weaving his spell. funny clothes, tinkling bell. So we've already got here that this misty morning, well, this to me, or misty mountain, is brought to mind by this. Uh, this wizard casts his shadow, weaving his spell. So the wizard is somebody who, throughout this, it never talks, just keeps walking, spreading his magic. He's an almost hidden figure. He's not somebody who's at the forefront of attention or seeking attention. He's not looking to um, be in conversation with you. He's in the background, working his magic, as it were. And I think I actually saw grey clothes somewhere else, so I'm not sure why, if I've got a different version here. But grey clothes would definitely evoke Gandalf. But he can be heard. He's got a tinkling bell. But this idea of casting a shadow. So in The Hobbit, Gandalf is often an elusive presence acting in the background to protect the company. He saves them from the trolls, not by kind of going in and slashing a sword, but by throwing his voice and misleading the creatures there, the trolls there. And then in the Mines of Moria, he it's kind of hidden and reveals himself at the right moment to save the company. So there is this sense of Gandalf is he's never fully in the his actions are always behind the scenes in some way. And this gets passed on to Bilbo when he gets the ring. He becomes the hidden agent who saves the doors from the spiders, from the Elven Kingdom. He saves everybody essentially from Smaug by what he learns there, and so on. And again, we get this idea of just keeps walking. So, as was mentioned earlier, there's this idea that he never picks up any moss. He's a rolling stone. He's constantly on the move, working to keep the forces of evil at bay, to stand against the powers of darkness. He must keep doing this to maintain the order of the world. If he doesn't, it would collapse. So he's doing this. Evil powers disappear. Demons worry when the wizard is near. He turns tears into joy. Everyone's happy when the wizard walks by. Sun is shining, clouds have gone by. All the people give a happy sigh. He has passed by, given his sign. Left all the people feeling so fine. So there is this idea that the presence of the wizard, like, is something which evokes in us happiness. This could be just by his very presence, but it can also be by the power, his his ability to deliver us from demons and evil powers, just like in the Eucatastrophe, right? Um, and we see this in The Hobbit. He Gandalf having this power, but also more broadly, the presence of Gandalf, the White Rider, especially when he's brought back as Gandalf the White, just his very presence gives hope and courage to men to fight against the darkness. Not always in the presence of the Witch King of Agmar, almost everybody flees apart from Gandalf. But in general, especially in the Two Towers, he is a source of inspiration and encouragement, and enables men to face dread and despair, to face ultimate final defeat, because he is there. He gives, and he is like the woman that Led Zeppelin find in Mordor. He is an embodiment of that divine warming and enlightening power and energy. So he brings that wherever he walks, is kind of blessed with that. It's almost like there's a kind of conferred holiness through this, and this is reflected in the weather. So the sun is shining when the wizard comes into play. Again, happiness, contentedness. he has passed by giving his sign. So this again, I think, is a reference to Gandalf, who at the beginning of the Hobbit, he he marks Bilbo's door with a little sign saying burglar is here looking for work, or something to that effect. And that's how the dwarves know to go to that house. So that seems he's giving a sign in that regard to help to start the quest. But also it's this conferring grace, I suppose, grace in a way, and in the Christian tradition that is through baptism. But yes, and I think Julius Flavius makes a very good point here. It's reminiscent of Gandalf riding through Minas Tirith, countering the Nazgul's fear wherever he happened to be, likely using the Ring of Fire, Nadia, to fire at people's hearts. And I agree, and you can see this. Just keeps walking, spreading his magic. This is his magic that he spreads. It's not a power which is meant to kind of dominate Sauron by force, but rather make people feel fine or able to overcome the darkness. This marks a little bit of a departure from some of what we've read already, because or seen already, because here we're talking about another agent, a being beyond us, having an important role in enabling us to take up the spiritual quest and fight the darkness, whereas in other ones, we are the primary agents in that. I think of the Battle of Evermore, although there are the Queen of Light, the Prince of Peace have a similar role. But then there's another song, and I think this is misspelled. I think it's just the Wizard by Uriah Heep, who are another a British rock band around this time. And they have a couple of songs which I wanted to look at. This is one of them. I hadn't heard of them until a few days ago, but much to my shame. But they've got some cracking tunes. I'd recommend them. So again, let's have a look at what they say. He was the wizard of 1,000 kings, and I chanced to meet him one night wandering. He told me tales and he drank my wine, me and my magic man, kind of feeling fine. So this wizard, he's very ancient. He's been a counselor of 1,000 kings. This could be a bit like Merlin, again Gandalf, who seems to be they're never the main guy. They're always there to support and encourage and enable the hero to overcome darkness. Again, this is a wizard who's wandering. He's not growing roots or gathering moss. He is constantly on the move. And whereas the other wizard, the Wizard of Black Sabbath, he is silent but spreading his magic. This wizard is telling tales. His power comes through his words, and together with the singer, he is able to, again, like Black Sabbath's wizard, creates this feeling fine. Indeed, I think feeling fine is almost a direct parallel of words here. So he had a cloak of gold and eyes of fire, and as he spoke, I felt a deep desire to free the world of its fear and pain, and help the people to feel free again. So certainly in his appearance, he's a bit different from a Gandalf type or the previous wizard. He's got a cloak of gold and eyes of fire. So there is something of deep value here. He's majestic, he's magnificent, and it shows in his clothing. He is the very best, and there's a sense of divinity here. His eyes of fire. So I think again, this ties into what was being said earlier about Gandalf and Nadia, the ring by Julius Flavius. It's a source of courage. It's a sort of intensity. It also shows dynamism, perhaps the very dynamism that lies at the heart of the world, and that he's in touch with the elements of nature. His words are like the piper in Stairway to Heaven. They evoke this deep desire, the outward calling evoking the inward calling. And here, though, whereas for something like Led Zeppelin, it's about going towards a place. Here, it's about a certain motivation, a certain courage to face the darkness, to free the world of its fear and pain, and help the people to feel free again. So it's a kind of liberating thing, a bit like we saw with Wishbone Ash, a certain attitude towards the world. And these are the wizard's words. Why don't we listen to the voices in our hearts? 'Cause then I know we'd find we're not so far apart. Everybody's got to be happy. Everyone should sing, for we know the joy of life, the peace that love can bring. So spoke the wizard in his mountain home. The vision of his wisdom means we'll never be alone. And I will dream of my magic night and the million silver stars that guide me with their light. So a few things here. The first is, in some ways, I feel like this verse is the most jarring thing we've read tonight. It's the most subversive in some ways because everything else has been tied in with some kind of mythology or biblical themes or Tolkien's fantasy, and they're all in some way or another have a reactionary tone. They respond to this idea that there's something more than the material world, and that actually and then also this eschatological ideas that there will be a judgment. Whereas this is very much, if you took this out of this song, it could be part of John Lennon's Imagine, right? If we all just loved each other, then the world would be okay. So I think there's this subversive element in in Uriah Heep that actually what the wizard is saying jars with the very mythology that it's coming from. However, we can still connect it because everyone should sing. Remember this idea that singing is a source of magical power to change the world is being drawn in there. So although the values they're espousing are very utopian and very, well, I would say quite secular hippie, the actual framework is still mythological. So spoke the wizard in his mountain home. The vision of his wisdom means we'll never be alone. So the understanding of the wizard that he has of reality that we should be responding to, this kind of authentic witness within ourselves that speaks to us in the natural order. This is a promise that actually in our fight against the darkness, we are not alone. We always have the wizard on our side. And this is a theme that we actually get in a couple of Uriah Heep songs. The next one we'll look at, this idea that we'll never be alone, that there's a presence on our side. The hiddenness of Gandalf is almost like that. The promise of this wizard is like that too, that we know that in our trouble, this wizard's is on our side. And the million silver stars that guide me with their light. So again, it's in the context of night, and that deliverance comes with the morning, as we saw in a previous Led Zeppelin song. So the wizard's advice is for this transitory moment where we're in a dark world. It gives us a path. It shows us the path we must follow for the time being. But there will be the dawn, and there will be deliverance, and there will be this liberation from fear and pain in its entirety. Although, as maybe one of the Wishbone Ash songs suggests, we need to confront and overcome fear and pain properly to grow. So that is our first Uriah Heep song. And we're now on to our second, probably the most famous one. But before we get to that, I'm just going to give folks a chance to If anybody's got any comments or questions, feel free to put them in there. I see that Lady of Shalott has joined us. Wonderful to see you. It's great that you could join us for a stream, Shalott, and I hope that you're doing well. And yeah, that's yes, I think you're right that he's the appearance of this character is not Merlin. It was more just the idea that he had served a king that I was referring to. But you're right. This is a much more. I think you said earlier that he's an astrologer. I can see that this idea of corresponding with the cosmos and understanding the nature of reality, and again tying in singing, music that is harmonious is in conjunction with the order of the universe. Yes, let's see. Hello, Colonel Crayon. Good to see you. We have no Bowie, I'm afraid, tonight. This is only really a drop in the ocean. There may be future Bowie streams to come, but we've done Led Zeppelin, we've done Wishbone Ash, Black Sabbath, and we're halfway through Uriah Heep. And after that, we have one more band. So yes, we're getting through a few. But as I say, there'll be more in the future, hopefully. I saw somebody mention Hawkwind when I first announced this stream, and you could even throw in Spinal Tap if you really wanted to. Well, that might be connected to the last band we're looking at, Marc Bolan. Hold on for that. Let's see. Right, so Lady in Black. This is probably Uriah Heep's. I think it's fair to say it's probably the most famous one. But before we get into that, I want to show you something. Because I think it is connected. We've already seen some very strong connections between various bands, and I'm convinced that this is an influence here. There we go. Right, this image on their first album is a lady in black, very strikingly, often a portent of death or darkness in some way. Well, Lady in Black is the name of this song, and I think I find it. I visualize her in this way. Maybe it's a wrong thing to do. I know she's also inspired by one of the members of the band saw the daughter of I think a vicar, coming to a hotel that they were staying at, and that also inspired the song. And so there is that element, but I do think this sense of this woman cloaked in black corresponds very strongly with the imagery we see on the Black Sabbath album. Anyway, influence is hard to prove, but we can certainly see resonance. She came to me one morning, one lonely Sunday morning, her long hair flowing in the mid-winter wind. I know not how she found me, for in darkness I was walking, and destruction lay around me from a fight I could not win. So we already have seen something a bit similar to this, right? In Ramble On, in the heart of Mordor, a place of desolation and death, the singer meets a fair girl who gives him hope and a vision of the divine. Well, here we have this woman with long flowing hair, kind of sign of beauty and fertility. She found this man in a place of darkness and destruction, akin to Mordor. And similarly to perhaps the last couple of songs, she finds him in a place of isolation, of loneliness, against a spiritual or real foe that he cannot defeat. This is again a bit like Frodo. He could not beat the ring. He was destroyed by it or broken by it. His will was broken by it. So she is a figure of grace. She offers deliverance in a place where um, he could see none by his own hand. And then this woman asks him to name his foe. I said the need with some men to fight and kill their brothers without thought of love or God. And I begged her to give me horses to trample down my enemies. So eager was my passion to devour this waste of life. So, like Black Sabbath, we've got a very strong anti-war message here, a very strong pacifist uh, mentality, which connects also to The Wizard by Uriah Heep as well. I think um, it's this idea that love is what we need, and violence is always evil. And he really wants to destroy this. He wants to stop this. And I think it's well, he has this burning hatred for evil and, well, for violence essentially. And so the thing that he couldn't defeat was the violence of the world. And so that's what's left him in a dark desolation of no hope. He's filled with despair and dread because violence will never be defeated by his own hand. Um, Again, it sounds very hippie-ish, but it's framed in kind of mythological language. I think the music's great, by the way. I think you're right. I couldn't get the song out of my head all day, but it's a very different message from some of the other ones we've seen. However, this lady in black wouldn't think of battle because that reduces men to animals, i.e., war pigs. So easy to begin, and yet impossible to end. The idea that violence begets violence. So if he crushes his enemies, not only is he engaging in violence, he is also going to become he becomes a tyrant as well. I think that's an important point, right? He too becomes a the villain, and as we see in the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf at various points out, we're not trying to replace Sauron with another Dark Lord who's on our side. We want to end all Dark Lords. So perhaps they're alluding to this. For she, the lady in black, the mother of all men, who counselled me so wisely then, I feared to walk alone again, and asked her if she would stay. So this mother of all men, well, it could be Eve, the wife of Adam, the first woman. It could be Lilith, although I think that's highly unlikely, who was, in some legends, the first wife of Adam. Um, but more, but I also think, given what we've just seen about Uriah Heep's emphasis on love, love is all you need, right, for the world to be perfect. Could love be the mother of all men? Indeed, if God is love, then he is that love is the source of being. Indeed, as well, in a technical sense, in the ideal, all of us have been created by love or kind of sexual passion, right? Eros. So it could be the mother there as well. And so he doesn't want this love that he has, love for humanity, to leave him, because otherwise he will return to this vengeful self who just wants to destroy his enemies, i.e., the violent. "O lady, lend your hand," I cried, "and let me rest here at your side." He finds rest, he finds contentment and fulfillment in love. Right? So love is the ultimate and highest good for this man. It is his heaven. It is Avalon. "Have faith and trust in peace," she said, and filled my heart with life. So again, this woman, she is able to bring in him or evoke in him great joy, great love, just as the woman in does for Led Zeppelin and Ramble On, right? It's this power again that they have. So let's continue. There's no strength in numbers. Have no such misconception. But when you need me, be assured I won't be far away. Thus having spoke, she turned away, and though I found no words to say, I stood back and watched until I saw her black coat disappear. My labor is no easier, but now I know I'm not alone. Again, not alone. Like it's the same as the last song. I find new heart each time I think upon that windy day. Again, windy. Uh, the children of God are blown by the wind, and there's this sense that although this woman, like the wizard, cannot be physically present with us, they will be on hand when we need them, and thus we must have courage in the way that they are calling us to, rather than despair and darkness. And if one day she comes to you, that is love, or the desire for peace, drink deeply from her words so wise, take courage from her as your prize, and say hello for me. So again, she is a source of courage and inspiration, much like Gandalf is for the defenders of Minas Tirith, or the men of Rohan, and so on. So I think they're obviously drawing on deep archetypes here, but at the same time they're using it to provide a much more explicitly modern message, as opposed to some of the other ones which are about spiritual fulfillment and moving into the kind of transcendence in some way. Let's see what people have been saying before we move to our last and final band and songs. So let's see. Used to love Uriah as Heep as a teen, still think they're one of the standouts of the era. Yes, they are, Ragplays, and welcome to the channel. It's good to see you. Yeah, I think they're great, and they've got a really distinctive sound, which really works for this kind of music, and it helps to create this mythological atmosphere. Again, we're given no kind of time or place. We just know it's in the past. So it's a bit like Led Zeppelin in that regard. With Ramble On, it's a tale that they're telling us. One of the deep things of the world, a truth that they're trying to convey. Scardy Warrior has given £5. Thank you so much, sir. Cheers, Nathan. Very interesting. I really love your picture as well. It's perfect for this stream. But yes, thank you so much. Very grateful. And it goes towards supporting the channel, which is much appreciated. Yes, it's hypocritical, but he has this turn, you see. The lady changes him, transforms him by her presence and by her words, much like one of these divine figures we've already seen, and we see in George MacDonald or in Tolkien. So it's he is a hypocrite, but he's been brought to a rather self-righteous place, I think. It's a self-righteous song. Yes, and precisely, the man in the song is at the risk of being what he hates for asking horses to trample down his enemies. Exactly. He's lost his he's lost in just hatred. I guess that's the thing. He thinks he's righteous, but he just hates the people who are violent, and thus becomes like them. Yes, so this is a good point, Julius Flavius. So in the Greek tradition, you have the idea of wisdom as Sophia. And in the book of Proverbs, wisdom, the wisdom of God, is portrayed as a woman, a divine woman. So there is this sense that the beautiful woman who is wise, her beauty is a reflection of her wisdom, and thus is able to transform us when we are in her presence, and we are drawn to serve her in many ways. So yes, I think that's a really helpful point, Julius. You've had many today. You've been doing a good job, sir. Right, so let's move on to our final artist or band, or bands, I suppose, because you have 2 with Marc Bolan, Tyrannosaurus Rex, and T-Rex. And there was so much we could have looked at today. We could have looked at his first album, which he was in the band with a man called Steve Peregrine Took, which tells you all you need to know about the influences here of mythology and fantasy on their works. And this was their first album. My people were fair and had sky in their hair, but now they're content to wear stars on their brows. It's an absolutely stunning album cover with so much mythological references here. But we will not be looking at this one today. It doesn't fit quite within our time frame. We could have also looked at one of his later albums, and here we have it's the same artist actually that did the first one, Futuristic Dragon. I love this cover so much. It's absolutely brilliant. You've got Marc Bolan here in a kind of angelic form, who's like a knight of old with the cross, but rather than the cross, it's T-Rex, right? And Rex King. So you've got a lot of ancient symbolism here. He's got a lance, but whereas before a warrior would be fighting the dragon, now in this future, this character Bolan, this angelic figure, I've just noticed his clothing's still in the kind of pop star style. He has mastered the darkness, the dragon, and has brought it to serve his will. And in the gleam of the sun, so the dark force has been kind of brought under the heel of the light, and mastered and channeled. And that is the futuristic dragon rather than the old conflict between the knight and the dragon. Now they are one force for good and mastering the world. So yeah, a dragon rider, which is so cool. I mean, great cover art. I was looking at big, like Ed Sheeran and Taylor Swift and the covers of their albums. They don't compare to this stuff, but they're the equivalents for today. Anyway, we are not looking at that either. This album either. We will be looking at, first and foremost, a song called Dragon's Ear, which I think it's from Beard of Stars, or Star of Beards. I always get the albums wrong. Let's see. T-Rex albums. We'll get there eventually. Sorry, chaps. Beard of Stars, A Beard of Stars, so 1970, right on the cusp here. And Dragon's Ear. And we could have picked so many from Marc Bolan. That's the thing. There are just so many songs filled with mythological and fantastical and magical language that I just had to pick one, right? And I thought this was a particularly good one. Dragon's Ear and Druid Spear protects you while the Dwarns are here. The winds of wrath chill cold the cloth that drapes her shape from fangs of fear. I love you, my love. Please taketh this heart which I bear. O heal my sorrow, weareth my arms like a charm through the dales of your doom. Our lives are merely trees of possibilities. So, we have here an attempt to already situate this song within a kind of older language, mythological, medieval, by words like taketh and weareth. So he's rooting it even in, because we would say takes or wears, right? So it's acting as if it's an older song, and then the language itself it's almost like using objects as charms in various ways. So a dragon's ear and a druid's spear. So these are mythological things which can be used to here protect while the Dwarns are here. Now I've looked for what Dwarns are. I cannot find anything. So if anybody knows in the chat, please do say. But it sounds it has a resonance with dwarf, visually dwarf, DW. But also the the music has a bit of a tension here, and he so it sounds like they're an evil creature, and they're a threat. So the dragon's ear and the druid's spear defend you from the dwarves. Who is the you in this song? Well, it is the singer's love, who we are. It is implied is in this place of the winds of wrath, and that there is cloth draping from their shape. So there is this sense that there's a kind of tension here. There is danger threatening this person, and that these charms or these objects are what will defend them from this. And then we move into the key verse. I love you, my love. Please taketh this heart which I bear. So, this could be seen as his love is something which he's giving to her, but it can also be literally his heart, like the dragon's ear. That's the idea. So, and this would connect to something like the giant's heart, the fairy story by George MacDonald, but also you can see it. The idea has its roots in something called original. Well, we can see it through the lens of original participation, which is a concept developed by Owen Barfield. And if you want to discover a lot more about that, I would really recommend Amy's, i.e. Gagging for Lit's latest video, where she discusses this in the context of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and Clarke. So I would recommend you check out her video. Her channel should have lots more views. But anyway, the key idea in the original participation for Barfield is that in the ancient world, people didn't distinguish the literal and the metaphorical as we do. So whereas we see the metaphorical as fictional, they would see it as real. So to say that the spirit is the breath of life is a true thing. It is actually the breath of life for these people. In the same way, to give your love or to give your heart, it's not just a metaphor. You can actually give your heart in a real sense by loving somebody. So that's where that comes from. Oh, heal my sorrow. So there's a sense in which if he gives his love to this woman, just like giving it the presence of the beautiful woman who is Sophia, the lady in black, or the woman in Mordor, by giving his love to this woman, he may be healed. We don't know of what, but of sorrow, sorry. So she will bring contentment to him, bring rest. She is the location of the divine. However, weareth my arms like a charm. These could be an actual embrace, but it could also be the spear, the ear, the heart. Through the dales of your doom. That's a great line. So she's going on a journey without him, perhaps, but with the tokens of his love, she will be protected from the darkness. So again, love is the thing which will conquer. But whereas in Uriah Heep, it's a very much, love is all you need. Here, love is something we give to another that enables them to conquer the darkness. So it's a bit different. This idea of through the dales of your doom. So doom, as many of you will know from watching Apostolic Majesty's videos on the Silmarillion, which I would, if you haven't seen, I would thoroughly recommend. It isn't just a kind of inevitable darkness that's being faced. Certainly in the Saxon, Wyrd, W-Y-R-D, can have a more kind of neutral meaning in the sense that one's doom can be given by the divine or the gods or whatnot. It can be pronounced, it can be proclaimed. And so through the dales of your doom, it's the things which are awaiting you. It's the things which will come to you, whether they could be good or bad. Usually bad, but it could be good as well. and this ties into the next line. Our lives are merely trees of possibilities. So there's this sense of a choice here, which activates the various routes or branches that we go down in our lives. It could also tie in with the world tree, Yggdrasil. My pronunciation is also awful, but of Norse mythology. But it gives a different sense to the Dales of your doom. It's saying, you know, although there is a certain path you may take, you can choose how you respond to that. So there are various possibilities. You can receive my love, and thus overcome, or you can be defeated. That seems to be the implication. So I'll give folks a second to catch up. I see a lot of talk about Steve Peregrine Took, who indeed he drew his name from Pippin, who is also Peregrine Took. So he was heavily influenced by the Lord of the Rings. So many of these bands were. It's just amazing. And what really gets me is at that time, okay, it was a popular book, right? But it wasn't mainstream in the way that it is today. The films really catapulted it into kind of normie consciousness in a way that at this time it was a bit out there. It was for folks who had actually read the books, not film viewers, and it tended to be these guys who were interested in like higher things, I suppose, and the mythological. They really drew to it, which is wonderful. And folks who would have no connection with somebody like Tolkien, who didn't share his Catholic faith or his Oxford Don lifestyle. It's Led Zeppelin, it's Uriah Heep and Black Sabbath. It's kind of interesting. Let's see. Yes, he did die by choking on a cherry stone, which is very sad. Modernists generally only see reality in relation to physical bodies. The spirit is important. They meant both are important. Indeed, the physical is often a manifestation of the spirit. We have visible souls, as it were. I think this is exactly what we were talking about in Stairway to Heaven, right? The woman who looks at the appearances of things and thinks she can just, what appears good is the way to her happiness or heaven. Materialism is the in its metaphysical sense, in its life sense, kills the spirit or blinds us to it. It's an enchantment. And we might even say it's advantageous to the war pigs that we think in that way. Yes, indeed. Much references to Lord of the Rings and Led Zeppelin and Bjarkian. Good to see you. Welcome to the channel. And yes, we were looking at Led Zeppelin a bit earlier. So if you've not managed to see that bit after the stream, feel free to go back to the beginning because I discuss a few songs there. I see Vingle has mentioned that. I did not know that. Shagrat the Vagrant. What a lad. Mad lad. Maybe we should all go by Lord of the Rings characters. I'm going to go by Barlim and Butterbur from now on. That people should refer to me as that. I think that would be good. Yes, right. So let us move on to our penultimate song. Sorry, guys. Fatty Bulger. Yes. Is that what you want to be known as, Rag Plays? We will have to oblige you. And Morgoth and Cirith as bands. That's cool. Yeah, sadly, Barleyman the Forgetful. Yeah, sorry about that. Who wants to be Lobelia Sackville Baggins? That's what I want to know. Anyway, so we're moving on to Monolith. which is from Electric Warrior. Indeed, even the name of the album, right? Electric Warrior. This is something that I think is a bit different about Bolan. Whereas the others that we've looked at tend to situate their songs in the ancient past, or try to frame themselves as kind of recovering the past in some way, but returning to a more authentic world than the current one, Bolan rather transfigures the present into the mythological, and we'll come to why exactly soon. But I think he doesn't see it as an alternative. He sees the present as brimming with magic, and so the Electric Age isn't one which is in contrast to the mythical. It actually is, and we need to see it for what it is. So the Electric Warrior is just the newest variant, and in a sense, to me, this is the most authentic approach, because we cannot go back to the medieval era. We just can't. Even if we put in all of the systems of government and society, our worldview is shaped by the modern world. But for somebody like Bolan, we can be modern electric warriors. We can find the magic and the transcendent within this current moment. And so he very much writes in the present compared to many of our previous songs. And so this song, Monolith, the throne of time is a kingly thing, from whence we all do begin. And dressed as you are, girl, in your fashions of fate, baby, it's too late. So this idea of the throne of time, it sounded to me automatically like the throne of the Ancient of Days in the Book of Daniel. And Bolan uses a lot of biblical imagery in his writings. So the Ancient of Days is the divine. It's God the Father, who will be on judgment upon the world. So he's on the throne of time. He sits in eternity, governing reality, and he is the king. It's a kingly thing, and all things begin from this, right? So the divine, the eternal, is the source of reality. It is our starting point of creation. And I'm sure we could put this in Neoplatonic terms as well, and so on. I love this line. Bolan's got a brilliant ability to create pictures in our minds. He's not so much as, like, with Led Zeppelin, it's very much a story that they construct in their songs. Bolan's much more a pictures guy who puts bits together, a bit like Dylan, who he can develop a story like in Tangled Up in Blue, but even in that, it's very much here's an image, here's an image, here's an image, here's a reference, here's a bit of rhyme, which doesn't quite work, but it's a kind of interesting set of pictures and language and words to put together. That's very much Bolan's style too. And dressed as you are, girl, in your fashions of fate, baby, it's too late. So this woman is literally clothed in kind of, her destiny is sealed. She can't escape it. Although it fashions, that sounds like it's movable in some way, but he says, baby, it's too late, and this is in the context of the throne of time. Now, why is it too late? What is too late here? Well, shallow all the actions of the children of men, fogged was their vision since the ages began, and lost like a lion in the canyons of smoke. Girl, it's no joke. I love this first line. Shallow all the actions of the children of men. So, well, let's start. Children of men. We've often heard of the Son of Man, which is Christ, or the children of God, which are the chosen or the elect or saved. But the children of men, this is an interesting kind of blurring of these two in this religious context. And all of their actions are shallow. There's two meanings here. The first is in comparison to eternity, in comparison to the throne of time, all of our actions are temporal, they're fleeting, They make very little impact upon the grand history of things, and indeed make no impact upon eternity. They come into being and then go out. And I think that's one meaning here, that like in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's this constant refrain of all that we do is in vain, because actually it will be used by others or replaced by others, and we do not enjoy the fruits of it, or it will pass away. Nothing we do will ever be permanent. So our actions are shallow in this regard. However, they can also be shallow morally, right? They can be guided by things which are not of deep significance. We can be trying to buy our stairway to heaven, looking for material objects to satisfy our deepest yearnings. These would be shallow things to do. And indeed, modernity, or our current society, is filled with people doing shallow things. Virtue signaling is such a thing, right? It's an attempt to gain reputation rather than actual cultivate virtue. It's a shallow thing to do. So this is another meaning of it. Fogged was their vision since the ages began. So these men are unable to see the right way to go, to do the right thing, to pursue the deep things, and they're actually doing shallow things because they're living in an illusion, or they're blinded to reality in some way. And indeed, the Bible talks about those who are in sin are blinded to the truth of God. They need to be supernaturally born again to be part of the kingdom of God. And this goes on, and lost like a lion in the canyons of smoke. So we're not only fogged, we're actually completely isolated. Now, like a lion in the canyons of smoke, I wasn't sure what this was a specific reference to. We have the Lion of Judah. We have Aslan in the Narnia novels, who, in The Horse and His Boy, confronts the horse and his boy in a kind of canyon. But to be lost in it, to be totally wandering, this is a dangerous thing. And it's no joke. So why is it too late? Well, because we are all in this going in the wrong direction. We're doing things which are morally shallow, that are taking us away from true enlightenment, and we cannot see it, and it's too late for many of us, if not all of us, for our whole society. It's lost, completely lost in decay. And well, given the throne of time is, the Ancient of Days is going to come in judgment, as we've seen with Wishbone Ash and Uriah, Heep, and Led Zeppelin, and Black Sabbath, doesn't bode well for us. Doesn't bode well. So we have one more song to go, but before that, let's see what folks have been saying. I have no idea what's going on in the chat. It's wonderful to see. It's great seeing it from the other side. Usually, usually it's me and others causing the havoc. I want to see this. Me and Vingle will do a stream one day on Norwegians who have read and referenced the Silmarillion in their music. All two of them. Vikernes and Fenris. I want to see this, pal. You better do it. Yes, Marc Bolan, we need to get AA to do Deepest Lore on him. Long overdue. Is he too mainstream, though? That would be a question. I know Warhol was done, but that was really because it was Dee's pet project. I know AA likes to find the obscure thing that only he knows about in minuscule detail, whether it's Batman or Thomas the Tank Engine or Vince McMahon's Rise to Power. Hopefully we can persuade him. He did do Dylan, I suppose. So we live in hope. We live in hope. Who knows? Maybe if he ever sees this, it'll give him the courage to do so. Yes, you are Fingolfin, my friend. It's a good character to be. We all hope we can be. Although Finrod Felagund, he's my guy. I love him. or Bellic Ithalion. He's the best. Let's see. I have no idea. Right. Somebody mentioning Wu-Tang. Well, earlier on I was mentioning NWA. So, so we've all got our flaws, right? That was a dark moment. That was the darkness that we need the lamp of the Hermit to save us from. Anyway, we've got one final song and then a little bit of deep lore on Marc Bolan. So this song, "The King of the Mountain Cometh," I couldn't find which album this came from, I'm afraid. I think it's from a single. I couldn't find it on a specific album. But it's a great tune. I'd thoroughly recommend it. Really weird. And yes, let's get into it. So I'm not going to do the little doors all the way through, unfortunately. Okay, so the King of the Mountain cometh. On his arm there was a dove. In livery green and tapestry clean, he called it his falcon of love. Oh yeah, called it his falcon of love. So the King of the Mountain. Who is the King of the Mountain? Well, there's an obvious reference again is the Lord Yahweh, King on Mount Zion. And on his arm was a dove. Well, the dove is the symbol of peace and the Holy Spirit. So again, this is eschatological language. This is like the Last Judgment once again, but this is a much more positive rendering of it. And he called his dove the falcon of love. Well, the Holy Spirit is in the Western tradition, I should say, the Western theological tradition is the bond of love between the Father and the Son. And by portraying it as a falcon, he's got speed, he's got incisiveness, he can bring to fruition the world through his love. So this, whereas again, people are going to think I'm too harsh on Uriah Heep, but whereas for them it's the love, the common love of or brotherhood of humanity, here it is divine love, which is going to bring peace to the world in the eschatological age. The mage of the Midnight Abbey was a child of 15 years. His eyes were bored with galactic lore. He had points upon his ears. So this mage, who is a child, so he's an innocent. He is a mage of a Midnight Abbey. Well, there's two things here. So it's an abbey. So it's a wizard who is the head of a religious order, like a monastery. Midnight, so it's tying it to the cosmos. He's an astrologer. He again is able to engage with reality and discover the deeper truths about the universe. Indeed, he knows galactic lore. But Midnight also is an interesting reference because Novalis, in his Meditations, I think it is, talks about midnight as being the point in which death, and he in that regard he is but is also the point of kind of opening up to the transcendent. So he's it's not just any time of day, right, or any part of the cosmos. He's the guardian or the presider over that which meets between this world and the eternal. He mediates between those two, and indeed, that not what a religious figure is supposed to do in that regard? But he's completely bored by this, which is a really weird and interesting thing to say. The galactic law, it's notional knowledge. It has no real impact upon him spiritually or emotionally. And I have a theory about this. It's going to be a wild one, but here's my theory. So he has points upon his ears. Now this could be an elfin figure, right? But I think he is a Vulcan. I think it's a reference to Spock because he knows of the universe, right? And the Vulcans also have their own religious kind of practices, and they have pointed ears. But the Vulcans are completely emotionally lacking. They try to suppress their emotions, and so this galactic lore isn't something which moves him. It's not knowledge which leads him into communion with the divine or towards the transcendent. It's bored. He's bored, or at least that's one way of reading it. I can see Julius Flavius again saying, eyes were bored meant his eyes were filled with galactic lore rather than tired of it. It could be that way as well. Yeah, as in bored into his eyes. Yeah, that would make sense as well. That would make sense. Either way, I think the Vulcan language would work, particularly as it's only a few years before this that the original Star Trek series was running, 66 to 69. I think we always forget how early it was. And Bolan, rather than like Led Zeppelin, who are just in the mythological mode, this Bolan blends the mythological and the science fiction together because the magic is in both. So yes, and Lady of Shalott, you're totally right. Huge at this time. So I don't think this is the right words at this point. Let me see if I can find another. There's an important yes, here we go. So the wild witch wizard of Isha was a changeling son from Mars. He learned his songs from the cosmic throngs and played them on a Fender guitar. He played them on a Fender guitar. So we see here that this, again, another magical agent, this time a witch, is tied in with the cosmos. So it's a character who's come from Mars, the planet Mars, so not from this world. So we're entering into an intergalactic reality. And his songs, again, songs have power. They can change the world. These are connected to cosmic throngs. He learned them from there. So he is like an astrologer or astronomer, learning the rotations of the universe, the music of the spheres, and building them into his own, or that he's reciting them, as it were. So, like Wainamoinen, he is drawing from the deep things of the universe, and rather than innovating, which is so common in modernity, his songs have power because they come from this source. Now, why did I want to use this version? Well, Isha, or Esher, is a town in England where one George Harrison had a bungalow. And so I do wonder if this is a reference to George Harrison, who, of course, was very famous for playing the guitar and a great musician. So that it could be a reference to him. Bolan has a great ability to refer to popular culture in his music. But here comes my favorite verse in this whole thing. The woman from the plateaus of Persia came to sell me a wondrous thing. In a horn of oak with a sulphurous smoke, she gave me King Solomon's ring, gave me the magical ring. So, this woman from the Far East, she's somebody who, well, not the Far East, the Middle East, I should say. She, something mystical, a bit esoteric. She seems like a sorceress or a witch of some kind because she's got some brew in this horn of oak, which evokes, a Nordic influence. But the sulphurous smoke, she's got a potion inside, perhaps, and from it uh, she gives the singer of this song King Solomon's ring. Now, King Solomon's ring doesn't appear in the Bible. It does, however, emerge as an idea within Jewish and Islamic kind of traditions. And the story is that King Solomon received from God a ring which God had inscribed with his name upon it. And uh, the ring also had the shape of a hexagram. So let me see if I can. Hexagram. There we go. A hexagram. And this is a precursor to the Star of David. And this ring, because of its divine inscription, had kind of two powers. One is that it had powers over the elements of the world, fire, earth, wind, and water. These were the four elements which all things were thought to derive from, and these elements actually were bound together in various ways, interconnected. Two were required for each, as it were. And this was reflected in the hexagram, which was supposed to manifest the four elements through its points. Remember back to the inside cover of Led Zeppelin 4, the Hermit holds a lamp with a star in the shape of a hexagram, six-pointed star. So again, it's evoking this idea. And the other power that Solomon's ring had was over spirits, good and evil in the world, including in the Islamic tradition, the jinn. So the gift of Solomon's ring essentially gives you the power to mold reality according to your will. It gives you the strength of to shape things in accordance with the glory of God, because it's given the name of Yahweh. It confers His divine power over all reality. So it's a much more powerful ring in some ways than Gaiji's ring, which I guess that gives you in some ways unlimited power by turning you invisible and thus avoiding consequences. But this, you can actually reshape reality. If we tie this in again with, these other singers or other mages are singing and making music, and that's how they kind of maintain the order of the world, then this singer, Marc Bolan, with King Solomon's ring, is through his song almost reshaping reality, which is an amazing kind of transfiguration of rock music. But there are very good reasons for why Bolan had such interesting ideas. And I think we can see them in an article that was written by Bolan, or by Rolling Stone, about an interview with Bolan. Let me see if I can get it up. So it talks about how Bolan. I'll just read a bit from it, and I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. And so here we go. This is the secret. This is Bolan. A successful hit rock and roll record is a spell. End quote. When he starts talking about spells and magic and raising the Egyptian gods from their timeless vaults and invoking our elementary planetary heritage, Bolan's not just swimming about in a lot of low camp acid flashes and King's Road occult. He's talking about deep forbidden lore. He spent 2 of his teenage years living with a black magician in Paris, and he keeps pretty quiet about what went on, except that there were a lot of books to read, a lot of spells to learn, a lot of mysterious comings and goings in the dead of night that provokes sinister imaginings of Crowley and H.P. Lovecraft. Mad Fausts like Charles Dexter Ward, bawling terrifying invocations at the sky and raising the goblins. Bolan's not fooling around here. He's all primed to vanish into the higher beatitudes of one day. There have been times he's nearly gone already. I wrote out a right calling on Pan to change me into a satyr. Literally, with hairy legs and hooves and horns. But I realized I couldn't do it. What's going to happen? I'm not going to be able to walk onto an Arcadian hillside and go up to my cave and just hang out. I wouldn't be able to go out of the house for a start. If I did, I'd probably get locked up and put in a hospital somewhere and dissected. Or put in a zoo. If Barnum were around, he'd put me in a freak show. I'm sure there were satyrs in the last 100 years that were in Barnum's freak shows. The rite would have worked. I do know how to do it. So we see in I'll keep going because he keeps talking. Canute wasn't a fool. He wasn't sitting down there on the beach at Hastings waving his orb and scepter and commanding the sea to stop for nothing. He just didn't have his spells down, that's all. But he knew it could be done. Moses did it, didn't he? What about Solomon? A very evil fellow, says Mark. There are ways, there are words, there are spells and rites and masses to conjure up and cool down elemental forces and beings and even gods. In 1933, in Cambridge, a party of unready occult pranksters hit upon the right spell and called up the god Thoth, and an Egyptian god of terror and bloodshed. He appeared and they panicked. Luckily, Thoth wasn't bothered. What do you want? Was all he said. And then he disappeared into the ages, Mark says, with a smile. That's one way to contact the other world, by specific magical formulae. The other is simply to be one of the chosen people. I believe that if you are one of the chosen people, and there are many, there are certain people that are very funky people. And if you are one of the chosen people, those creatures will come to you because they dig you. In other words, cultivate your hallucinations and cellular promptings, and you can just sit and meditate and zero in on the spirit, just like Mark's doing right now, sitting by the slow Pacific surf at Malibu in the noonday Christmas sun, calling on old Thoth, his arms reaching out and his eyes jammed shut and his body starting to quiver now, these harsh, adenoidal murmurings and bloody screams. He stopped just in time. It was hard to tell if the distinct shiver I felt was a gust from the tombs or just the full force of Bolan's madness. I want to walk upon the galaxies. I want to hold the oceans in my hand. Many people say, yes, very poetic. A magician means he wants to hold the oceans in his hand. End of story. So we can see in this passage, I mean, I think the journalist clearly doesn't understand Bolan if they think it's all about just taking drugs, and there's a somewhat satirical tone here. But I definitely think that for Bolan, at least the image he's presenting, is that he genuinely believes that the world is brimming with magic. It's not in times ages past as Tolkien or Led Zeppelin would kind of portray it. Rather, the world as it is now is one which can be changed using spells and incantations. This would tie in, the article mentions Aleister Crowley, who, and I think we should probably do a stream on him at some point. It'd be great to get Semiogog and Philosophicat, if they know about him, on. He's super interesting. But he believed that magic incorporated technology and science were kind of forms of magic spelt with a K, CK at the end. And so we should harness these things and use them to shape the world, just as we should use spells and incantations. These are two sides of the same coin. And in a sense, for Bolan, this is manifested in the idea of the electric warrior that he is. His songs are also these sorts of incantations which in some way shape the world. And as we've kind of been discussing throughout, not only is this rooted in Pythagorean cosmology, but it also seems to have some ring of truth in that the music we enjoy, that we listen to, it changes us. It can work within us, vices and virtues. It binds us to certain ideas and motivations, for good or for ill. In that respect, it kind of is a spell. It enchants us. A good piece of music enraptures our minds and takes us down a certain path. In a sense, then, Bolan on stage is a magician. He is a magician for the technological age. And this is where I think he differs quite substantially from um, the others, in that take Black Sabbath, who fundamentally rejected Crowley's teachings. Um, Bolan, on the other hand, is very, you would think Black Sabbath would be into this stuff, but they really weren't. They just used the imagery. Whereas for Bolan, this is a very key idea to his music. It's somewhat more ambiguous with Led Zeppelin. We saw how songs were and dancing and were kind of weapons to use against the darkness. But it's not clear that they think of them in the same terms as this, where, Bolan was literally saying he could turn himself into a satyr, and that one could hold back the waves through the power of incantation rather than maybe divine miracle or something like that. So yeah, so I think that's a really weird and interesting place to finish this part of the discussion. Before closing up, I just wanted to kind of touch on a broader set of points, which is why then do all of these groups and individuals draw upon mythological, fantastical, and religious, specifically Christian imagery in their songs to varying degrees in each of those categories? And why does that appeal to audiences? They didn't have to. I know that there is a lot more kind of Masonic language in the Stones and the Beatles, but in general, a lot of their songs don't wander into this sort of area, especially the Stones. Um, it's much more, or maybe this is the wrong way of putting it, but the ethos behind much of the Stone songs is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That isn't the case here in these bands. There's higher things. They're trying to move, and perhaps they're reacting against older forms of rock and roll, which were very hedonistic and materialistic, and saying, no, actually, there's something more important. There's something that demands our attention, that we desire, and we can't escape it. We can't buy our way out of it with material goods, with drugs or sex, and any of those things. And perhaps part of the appeal is that audiences also felt this, and the archetypes of mythology, of religion, of deep-rooted ideas from Christianity within the culture lend themselves towards these concepts, towards these yearnings, which are reflected in the music as well. The greater development of the guitar solo, the introduction of more thematic ideas, rather than simple 12-bar blues, for example. These things point towards an evolution, perhaps, in that regard. And returning to the old, they're literally becoming like bards, telling us the stories from our past, in much the same way that Tolkien reformulates the mythologies that he's imbued and retells them to us in a new form. These songs do the same thing. And that in itself gives them power, much greater power to move us in some ways or another, because they speak to that deep yearning for the transcendent. I guess as well, they also, in that regard, tie into authenticity and sincerity. For many people during that period, traditional forms of religion had become insincere, and indeed much of culture. There were many cultural Christians, for example, who weren't shaped by the transcendent or God's love in their life. They rather had an adherence to a cultural institution, the church. And these people who were making this music and others felt the insincerity of that and um, find authentic ways of engaging with the transcendent. They rejected Christianity as a consequence, but as we saw, many of them draw on its archetypes and such and so on in their music. And we could tie this in with Thomas Carlyle here. Carlyle emphasized that the true religion of each individual is not their professed faith. It's not the thing that they give allegiance to, rather, it is that which they sincerely feel about the world, and thus what moves their thoughts and their actions. And so the heroic man, the great hero, the great man, he is utterly sincere in his allegiance to the transcendent order of reality. And that is something which these bands, in their use of mythological concepts, are trying to cultivate, I suppose, is that sincere engagement or pursuit of higher things, whether it be the place of spiritual rest, the rock, or it be universal and peaceful love, or it be the kind of incantations and remolding the world. These are all attempts to, from a sincere point of view, and the music itself. I think this is important. These aren't just words, and that's the limitation of this stream. These are songs, and songs arouse emotion in us. So when we sing those words, we feel authentic singing them, because um, we feel what's being said, because the music, these melodies, are so powerful that they arouse within us the emotions the bands wanted us to listen to feel, and that's why they were so successful. That's why they are like spells. Um, so I think there's all these interconnected reasons as to why there was this sudden movement within this period, 70 to 72, and in later eras, but I think particularly then, that there were all these bands going around using these mythological and religious archetypes and themes. And it's just amazing, because the story we get of that period is one of secularization, right? The story we're told is people left the church, and religion um, was abandoned. And part of that, it was undermined by popular culture, including rock and roll. And certainly there is a strong argument for that. But religion didn't disappear, and indeed Christianity didn't disappear. Many of the highest and noblest ideals within these songs comes from or is informed by these traditions. So I think that's a really interesting point, that it wasn't totally discarded. Anyhow, um, that is what I've got for this stream. Let me see what people have said in the chat, and then we can all get a good night's sleep. And yes, so let's see. We have. Thank you, Wolfish Naturalist. Very much appreciated. Uh, and good to see you. Good to see you, pal. Everybody's welcome here who's pursuing the highest truths and the good and the beautiful. The music can definitely move people. It can. I think one of the interesting debates that you see in the Renaissance is that is music something which cosmologically moves us or metaphysically moves us in virtue of its being, or is it something that moves us because it sounds a certain way? These are interconnected, but they're not the same. So it's like, does the music move us at a level below how we hear it? So that would be the kind of Pythagorean Lutheran view. Whereas for Calvin, it's because the way it sounds evokes pleasure in us, but it doesn't like exorcise demons or something akin to that. So what kind of movement does it evoke in us? I'm inclined, if I mean, I'm quite persuaded that we should see the world as a much more magical place, and that war pigs are casting spells upon us. Um, so in that regard, I would see it as a kind of incantation in some way, uh, or of that kind of power. Yes, and it does sound like hippie stuff, Johnson. I'm not going to lie, but I don't think it's totally off the beaten track. I mean, when Bolan says he could have turned himself into a satyr, that might be pushing it, but who knows? I mean, Bolan's seen some crazy stuff, right? Crazy power, indeed, indeed. And exactly, it's I think you feel that authenticity, and that's why it still appeals. It comes from something deep and has real spiritual kind of strength to it in a way that, you know, I listen to Ed Sheeran. No offense, the guy seems nice enough, but like I don't feel power behind what he's singing. It feels very shallow by comparison. Oh, Matthew Sard, I didn't see you there. Good to see you. Um, sorry you couldn't make it, but I like that you've got a hexagram going on in your star. Um, Spell of destruction, indeed. I did not know this, Wolfish Naturalist, and maybe for a future stream we will have to look at Black Widow. I agree, Wiggles. Good to see you. I like your picture of Farage, and yes, we'll be getting to bed soon. uh, yes, I agree. It's been a lot of information, but hopefully it's a good resource then. And we've been interconnecting texts and seeing themes within texts and moving them around and finding lots of deep threads rather than being very formal in it. So uh, I think it's something that, even, you know, if you asked me to explain it again, I wouldn't be able to articulate a lot of it, because it's just filled with these songs. This was some Panama Hat was talking about how many people are proud and can't see their place in the world, and it struck me, you know, I couldn't write these songs. The minds, the souls, the hearts which produce them, it's absolutely amazing. It's wonderful, and we get to talk about it. It's awe inspiring. It's really and exciting, and I hope some of that joy that I found just listening to these beautiful and stirring sub creations can be passed on to you, CM Piano 2. I'm seeing stuff about the Queen. We're not going to get into that tonight. Uh, yes, yes, indeed, indeed. And yes, this would be a whole other stream, but you're quite right. Jazz was a subversive thing. And yes, exactly. This is exactly what somebody like Palestrina would have thought, that it was a virtue instilling um, both at a metaphysical and at an auditory level, that it worked. So I don't see any more comments. So I'm just going to wrap up. Just another reminder that the channel is thanks to you guys' support and constant kind of love for the channel, and views and likes and comments. It's been monetized, which is great news. I'm really delighted and thankful for that. Really appreciate everybody's support along the way. And a couple of things about that is, one, that if you want to support the channel, you know, financially in any way to help it to grow, and you know, I'm it would be helpful for me in many ways, but especially in terms of trying to grow it into a place where I can run courses in the future. But you can do this in two ways. You can either send a super chat, or you can become a member of the channel. And there are two bands of membership, one for £2.90 or £3 a month, and one for £5 a month. There's no obligation either way. I know there's lots of people looking for memberships and super chats and whatnot. And as this stream is shown, I don't show preference. I engage with everybody or a number of people in the chat, and I try to provide interesting content regardless. So it's not like you'll be getting a split just towards the people who pay. Not at all. It's only if you want to give. That's the idea. But everybody's welcome, and I'm super excited for what the future holds. Speaking of which, there are a few streams coming up that I should advertise. So we have on the let's see, a couple of live streams coming up. We have one on the let's see, can I even read? It's getting late. The 20th of May, which is going to be a follow-up stream for That Hideous Strength. And it's going to be featuring Mr. Radlib, Mrs. Radlib, and Gagging for Lit. And we're going to be talking about romance and the genders or sexes. So that will be really good. And then the following month in June, I have a stream planned, The Political Philosophy of Skyrim's Civil War. We'll be looking at the politics, history, and ideas underlying that in the game Skyrim. So those should be really great. In the meantime, there may be a few videos here or there. We'll see. It depends on the schedule. And of course, I'll be on, Lord willing, with Apostolic Majesty on his Tolkien streams. Yeah, so thank you once again, everybody. I've really appreciated your company this evening, this Friday evening, now Saturday morning here. And whether you've popped in for a little bit or for the whole stream, it's been great. I've learned a lot as well from the chat. And I hope that wherever you are, whatever situation you're in, that God gives you grace, light, peace, hope, and truth, that you will find your rock. God bless all.